Вітаю нашого волі, я полкового знамена, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою всі скидання, воно вібрало у собі.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні. У нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
О, бля! Игорь!
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 414 of the news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine here on a brand new week. And in amazing news, Russian forces are retreating off the field so badly in the area of Bakhmut after the blistering defeat at the Battle of the Railway Station yesterday that Russian commanders are now having to give the orders to execute deserters so that way they can try and stop them from leaving the field. This is massive news because we've been seeing the Battle of Bakhmut progressing in a very slow roll for the Russians, where they've been slowly pushing the Ukrainians out of the city. But as of yesterday, it appears that all Russian offensives have completely halted after the slaughter that occurred at the train station the other day, and now the Russians are trying to bring their forces back under control. But before we even get into that news tonight, there is still even crazier and more interesting news to cover, and we'll be getting to that here in a little bit, of course. That is pretty much most of the news for tonight comes from the city of Bakhmut and the surrounding battlefield. But here in the United States today, many of y'all may have not known this, but just away from Alabama, in a almost completely indirect way, has kind of had something happen that is directly pertaining to the Ukraine war. In Louisiana, just a few, maybe 150 miles away from Alabama at the best, was a gas station, and a native Louisianian, if that's what you call them, drove to their gas station to go probably get some Slim Jims and probably some what did they call them? Newports. While they were trying to pick up their Newports and Slim Jims, they pulled into the parking lot. They looked over beside them, and lo and behold, there was a whole T-90A on the back of an 18-wheeler just sitting there. We can see that this one, for a short while, was actually used by Ukrainian armed forces, because we can see the crosses on it, showing that the Ukrainians did, in fact, use this T-98 for a short while, but it appears that after the Ukrainians captured it and used it, they have now sent it to the United States, so that way the U.S. military and the Department of Defense can have this thing picked apart and look at the, I guess you could say, interior workings of most likely the T-90's turret, as the hull of the T-90 is just a T-72 hull, so there's probably not a lot there. And we can also take a look at the explosive reactive armor that's on this T-90 and get a complete understanding of what the T-90 really is. We've never really been able to get a clear understanding, at least until this war, of what the T-90A is made of. One thing that we do know is that Western weaponry can easily punch through a T-90 and destroy it. We have seen that over the course of the Ukraine war with the Javelin anti-tank guided missiles. We've also seen that with Stugnas and other kinds of anti-tank systems, not just Western ones, but Ukrainian ones as well. So the armor is not enough to stop a Western anti-tank weapon, or a Western weapon for any of that matter, whether it be anti-tank or not. One thing we do want to know is how well can it stop a Western anti-tank weapon, and what are its weak points, what are its weaknesses, what can it do and what can it not do, and we've never really gotten an exact understanding, although our understanding has been fairly good up until this point. This thing's probably on its way through Louisiana to a Army depot, or just really any branch of the military's depot, except for the Navy most likely, for it to be torn apart and looked at in great detail. But we can see that this person right here at this gas station or truck stop got a really good look at this T-90, and a very rare sight, especially here in the United States, to see an intact and once completely operational T-90A that not only served in the Russian army, but in the Ukrainian army as well. Quite a wild bit of news, and speaking of wild news that's been happening in the United States, many of y'all may have heard about the alleged person who apparently disclosed the classified documents that made a large stir on the internet last week on a Minecraft Discord server. It appears that Discord is once again causing trouble, not just for us in the form of two schisms, but for the US government as well, so I'm glad to know that we're on the same page. It appears that the person that they're alleging to have committed this crime has been arrested today in the town of Dighton in Massachusetts, and we can see the video of them bringing out the alleged suspect in this video. We would like to make it clear that this person is not guilty of any crime yet. And we've seen a lot of people today jumping to conclusions that this guy is guilty, and the reason they're bringing him to court is to prove his innocence. That is not the way the U.S. justice system works. He is innocent at this moment, and it is the government's responsibility, the court's responsibility, to show that he is not innocent and he is in fact guilty. So at the moment, this is just an alleged suspect. I want to make that as clear as possible because if just in case if the government did get it wrong and this guy had nothing to do with a classified documents leak, his reputation could be destroyed just from the fact of everyone saying he's guilty already.
Do you know what his Discord name was?
It was some kind of crazy name. What was it again?
Jack the Dripper.
Jack the Dripper. That's a very Discord-esque name. At least it's
Yes.
better than, I don't know, Iceland. I don't know what the hell Iceland really was supposed to be.
Oh, man.
But we could see that they even pulled out the, looks like the Ukrainians came over here to arrest this guy. Because this thing almost looks like a Cossack armored car. I don't know what kind of MRAP or armored car this is. A fairly nice looking one, actually. And we can also see that this guy lived in a fairly nice house. I don't know if it's his house or his parents' house, but we can see him coming out there in front of the armored car with his hands behind his head and walking up to it.
This might have been slightly overkill for the suspect being in the military and that age.
Well, you know, it's a bit of a big deal that classified documents have been published on a Minecraft Discord. It's a bit of an embarrassment for the government, so they're probably trying to save face in a way by sending out a crew like this. Also, I believe that wouldn't be a state crime, it would be a federal crime, so these are probably some kind of a federal agency that's out here like the FBI. I think it was the FBI right here that did apprehend the guy, if I remember the information I got correctly, but nonetheless, the guy is has not actually been charged yet with any crime. He is currently being held in some detention facility. We don't know exactly where, but they may charge him later, or they may be interrogating him right now to see if they can get any information as to who actually did conduct the leak. From the information I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matthew, this guy wasn't the actual guy who leaked the information. He was just the owner of the Discord server.
Well, see, that's what we don't know yet. We don't know exactly what they've arrested the guy for. We do know that he was the supposed leader of the, I believe it was something related to Minecraft, something like that. And they're saying that he was the leader of it, but they're not saying if he's the original source of the leak.
And that's fairly interesting to hear, so I'm largely going to have to withhold judgment on any statements there, but I see a lot of people saying that the guy is already a traitor and should be thrown in prison, and I have to just say this, it works in the United States. This guy is innocent right now. That's why we're saying he's an alleged suspect that's been arrested. If you had been falsely charged with murder, whoever's saying the guy's just guilty, case closed, if you were falsely charged with murder, would you like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people saying you did it and they hope you rot under the prison, even if you didn't commit it? Think about that for a minute, and then think about this guy. Of course, the court will look over all of the evidence that can be brought up on this guy if he's ever charged with anything he's brought to trial, and then the jury will make the decision as to whether the guy did commit this crime, which is, of course, most likely going to be some form of treason or not. It's always innocent until proven guilty. It's never guilty until proven innocent. If it worked that way, it would be pretty jacked up, because that means the government could come around and get anybody for anything, and it's in your court to try and make yourself innocent instead of them trying to prove that you are, in fact, guilty. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on out of the United States and on into Russia, actually. And also, one more thing I'd like to say, because I see some people still going off like, guilty, guilty. We're not Russians, okay? In Russia, you're brought to court and you are guilty until proven innocent. It doesn't matter what they say on the books. You are guilty over there. And when we watch people like Brittany Grinner and the current news journalist that was arrested over there and put into prison, we go, how unfair. They didn't even really commit a crime, but the Russians are already treating them like it's an open and shut case. You know, and then we do this to this guy over here. That makes us no better than Russians. When we sit there and just throw the whole concept of innocent until proven guilty out of the window and say that this guy is just guilty from the outset and there's nothing he can do to redeem himself. That is not an American thing.
And also, we don't know anything yet, except for the fact that he was somewhat connected to the leak. I mean, it could come out that the guy was simply the leader of the Discord group, and they decided to go after him because that's the only person that they could go after. So we don't know anything. So I see some folks saying that we have proof he's guilty, and that's simply not true.
And I'm just saying, I see a lot of people saying the guy needs to get a firing squad. I'm just going to ask you this. If I was the government and I said that you had committed a crime, would you like me to take you out back and shoot you immediately, or at least give you a trial? I feel like most people will want a trial. That's how the government system, that's how the court system works over here. So with that, we're going to be moving on from the New England area and everything going on there, and on into Russia, where we saw a very interesting group of people walking around. It's quite an odd group, I would have to say, because you see, the Russians went into this war, and one of their original aims, or at least claims, was that they were going to be quashing Nazism in Ukraine. And what we saw is that there were some guys going around doing the Sieg Heil in a town called Ufa in Russia, and saying that Russia is for Russians. This was caught from inside of a car. We can actually see them right here already, the three of them. And there they go on their righteous path through Ufa. And with that, that's the end of the clip. Not really a long one, but fairly interesting to see that they went out of their way to destroy Nazism, and then they have Nazism? Kind of weird if you ask me, but still, we're going to be moving on because that's all the news we have from Russia today. But going back into international news, we also saw that the Turks, of course the Turks are always up in the air, nobody really knows whose side they're on, they are still supporting supplies, well, delivering supplies to the Ukrainian armed forces. We saw a large train filled with Turkish armored vehicles heading on their way to Ukraine through Romania. These are called Cobra 2s. And we haven't really seen these before, but they are sending masses of them. Quite a large consist of them.
Those are pretty nice, too. They look pretty new.
Yeah, they are nice. I mean, they are Gucci APC, well, not Gucci APCs, but Gucci armored cars. We need to pull these things up because I haven't really seen these before. A Cobra 2 armored car. It is the Autocar Cobra. That appears to be one of them, but it seems as though this one was actually stripped down a little bit compared to the other one we saw, and this one's actually in Bangladesh. It is made by Turkey. And so let's scroll down a little bit more. Here's the Autocar Cobra 2 that we saw in the video right there. And this one, man, they put the grating that you see in a liquor store on the windshield. It's pretty interesting. Let's see, what's the specs on this thing? This thing was first made in 2013, still in service to the present day. A single one of these vehicles weighs 26,000 pounds, or about, let's see, let me do some math here, and I'm sorry everyone, I'm probably going to get it wrong. About 13 tons. So quite it's incredibly heavy. I mean, this thing is actually heavier than most light tanks that you would have found during the Second World War. That's pretty wild just to be a normal armored car. We can also see that it can hold 9 people, 2 crew members on the front, and then 7 in the back of the car. We can also see that it only has 281 horsepower for a 26,000-pound vehicle, which is kind of a little low, in my opinion. We can also see that it is a V6. We can see that it can travel 430 miles on 1 tank of gas, and it also has a top speed of 68 miles per hour, although it's going to do 0 to 60 in eventually. But still, it is a fairly interesting and fairly nice looking armored car that the Turks are sending, and it's great to know that they're going to be sending an additional 200 of these things to the Ukrainian armed forces, because this will certainly help crew survivability numbers to go further up through the roof while the Russians are going even further down. Speaking of going further down in crew survivability, the Russians are not going to be having the kind of crew survivability stats we've been seeing throughout the war, which were already abysmally low. They're now going to be dreadfully low, because in the Southern Front today, we saw verifiable proof, and let me go to Twitter real quick, that the Russian army is actually fielding those T-54s and T-55s on the front line. This is a picture taken during the night in the Zaporizhia front line area, and we can see in the background, behind this Russian soldier, a T-54, T-55 series tank. These things are, of course, old enough that they just missed the Second World War by 4 years. That's how old these tanks are. And they're now being used on the front lines by proper Russian forces. And you know the Russians are bad off. I mean, well, we saw last year, around the time of July and August, they were bringing T-62s onto the front line, and we said, oh, that's kind of bad, you know, because those are quite old, not really that good. Now they're bringing in nearly World War II vintage tanks onto the battlefield, and they're doing that badly. They're running out T-62s even, and now they're bringing these things out. And so while Ukrainian crew survivability and infantry survivability will be going up thanks to the introduction of even more armored cars, Russian tanker survivability will be going even further down. I mean, hell, Russian tanker survivability has never been great in this war. I mean, T-90Ms can't even protect the crews from getting blown away, but this T-55 certainly is not. There is no such thing on this tank as, I guess you could say, composite armor or explosive reactive armor. Everything on this thing is rolled homogeneous steel, and that means that it is literally just sheets of steel that were welded onto each other, and that's what serves as the tank's armor. This was obsolete when this tank was introduced. In fact, all armor when this tank was introduced was obsolete, and that's why you would see over the next decade after this thing came out, and really the next 2 decades, that every single tank designed rarely ever had thick armor. And one of the best examples of that is a tank that the Ukrainians are also getting as well, the Leopard 1. You see, after the end of the Second World War, I guess you could say the field of armor and armor technology was facing the exact same problems that tanks in the modern world are facing. No matter how much armor a tank has, any anti-tank weapon can practically punch through one. And so tank designers went through a dilemma. What's the point of armor at this point if anything can punch through any amount? So the Germans decided, and this is kind of the philosophy that you would see throughout the entire Western world, and even in the Soviet Union to a small part until composite armors came around in the 70s and the 80s. And they said, what if we just removed the armor from the tank for the most part, just allowed it to stop small arms fire from getting through, and just mounted a pretty decent firepower, a pretty decent main gun on the tank, and then gave it a pretty good top speed? What could it do? And then that's what everyone went with. You could see that with the French as well, with the AMX-30. This one actually had so little armor that a 50 caliber machine gun can actually punch through the side armor of this tank. Just, you know, not really that armored at all. And then the Russians, of course, they had the T-54 and the T-55. A little bit more armored, actually, than their Western counterparts. The front glacis, I believe, is around 120 millimeters thick, which is, I believe, thicker than a Leopard 1's front upper glacis. But still, in this era of tank technology, 120 millimeters of rolled homogeneous steel was not going to stop anything from going through. Heat FS would blow straight through. When APFSDS was introduced about a decade later, it would also cut clean through like butter. In fact, it cut through too well. So while it has a little bit of extra armor, the armor doesn't mean anything because it's still not going to stop anything. So it's quite interesting to see that the Russians, once again, are showing that their military had really no teeth to it. They had a very good appearance at the beginning of this war. They looked strong, and they had a lot of people fooled if you had never looked at the spreadsheets and the actual information about their army. But a year and 2 months later, the Russians are running out of everything, to the point they're pulling these things out of the background and trying to figure out how to use them. And even still, even with the Chinese supporting them, which we also put out on our Twitter, and I'm about to be popping over to our Twitter because we got to plug that thing. You know, we got to plug that thing in like an electric wall socket. Let me go to the Twitter, because it came out today that the Chinese actually did agree to supply the Russians with lethal aid. You can see that right here. It was published 3 hours ago on our Twitter. And of course, you can join our Twitter fairly easily, actually. You just go into the link in the description below, click on it, and then go join our Twitter, and we upload all kinds of information and news here on the Twitter constantly throughout every single day. There's never a break of coverage on Twitter, and we cover some of the news that we don't even get to here on the stream, because sometimes it's just too small of a bit of news to really cover here. But this is a pretty big bit, and we don't know what kind of lethal aid the Chinese have provided to the Russians. We are assuming that it is fairly small and most likely mortar shells and small arms ammunition, but it could be larger than that. We're not exactly sure at the moment, and it is quite concerning to hear that the Chinese are actually supporting the Russians in any way, shape, or form. And once again adds on to the fact that Macron is now saying that he would like to align the French, and more so the Europeans, with the Chinese, considering that they're now supporting the Russians, which are against Ukraine, and then the Europeans are adamantly against the Russians, and they are supporting Ukraine, although it appears that Macron's now having a change of heart on that as well. But still, that's a little bit of an explanation about how badly the Russians are doing, and also showing a little bit of proof in the Zaporizhzhia front line of how badly it really is going. And meanwhile, in the area of Odessa, we actually saw a clip today because, you know, we're talking about crew survivability, how bad things are really going for the Russians. But we all have to remember that a year ago, on this very day, things went a whole lot worse for the Russians than they ever could have thought. On this very day, 1 year ago, almost at this hour, the Moskva sank to the bottom of the sea and was sunk by 2 Neptune anti-ship missiles that were fired from a land battery. And we actually saw a clip. Now, I'm not really sure if this is true or not, but we saw a clip that claims that this is a video of the anti-ship missile launcher that fired the Neptunes that sank the Moskva. And these missiles that we're going to watch on film are the exact missiles that hit the Moskva and sank it a year ago. Now, we're not really sure. It does say, and as reported, they were the ones that sank the Moskva. And so here's the clip. When you see the Neptune anti-ship launcher right over there. And we can see that it does line up. We know that a lot of the leaves have not returned to the trees at this point of the year, and we can also assume the same from last year. And so this may actually be a legitimate video. When you see them firing off the Neptune anti-ship missile, and when you see them firing off the second one, and they're now on their way. And one has to remember, what's very eerie about this video is that there were 2 missiles fired, and it would be 2 Neptune anti-ship missiles that did hit and sink the Moskva. And so I believe this is actually the video. We've never seen a video of anything like this before. The actual video where the Moskva was sunk. Those were the 2 missiles that did it right there. For the first time ever, a year later, we may have finally seen that footage. And it's unbelievable to think that a Russian flagship, a Slava-class cruiser, was sank by the Ukrainians a year ago. An entire year ago. And what was crazy is that at that point, a year ago, we were like, dang, it can't get worse for the Russians. And then it did. It did. It went terrible for the Russians. But let me pull up the Slava...
Oh, terrible. Quite terrible.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. It was terrible. But here's the Slava-class cruisers. There were only 3 of these completed. We can actually see a picture right here, and I believe this is the... Yeah, it is the Marshal Ustinov, which is a sister ship of the Moskva, the exact same class with the exact same armament. And that's what it looks like right there. This ship went to the bottom of the sea. And I'll actually scroll down because I'm sure the Wikipedia has a picture of the Moskva burning and sinking. Let's see here. See, we can actually find the Moskva right here. So let's scroll down because I know this. Oh, wait a minute. There's no picture of it sinking? You would think they would have that because they have an entire little article about it right here. But no, they don't. Nonetheless, though, it is unbelievable to think that it's an entire year later, and the Russian Navy never really recovered from this loss. After the Moskva was sank, we've never seen Russian naval forces in the Black Sea getting that close to the Ukrainian coastline to ever come under anti-ship fire again. For a small while after this, we would see some destroyers get lightly damaged by Ukrainian fire and similar situations, but we would never see anything as critical of a loss as the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the Moskva, being sank again. So we haven't seen the flagship get sank for the Black Sea Fleet since the Moskva, but still unbelievable to think about and crazy to think we finally got the video a year later of the missiles that sank this ship. And so with that, also another thing that this article says, and this is actually pretty wild to think about, the Moskva is the largest ship that has ever been sunk in a war since the General Belgrano was sunk by, I believe it was the HMS Vanguard, which was a nuclear submarine operated by the Royal Navy during the Falklands War. And the General Belgrano was a Cleveland-class cruiser that the United States sold to the Argentinians in the 50s. And that was the biggest ship at the time that had been sunk outside of the Second World War. And now the Moskva has taken that title from it as well. So the Moskva is the largest ship that has ever been sunk in a war after World War II. And the Ukrainians did it a year ago. Unbelievable to think about, and a crazy thing to think that happened a year ago to this day. But of course, that is
I'm just shocked how fast the Russians got good at building submarines, because the Moskva is the quietest sub on the market right now.
It really is. You know, for an entire year, it's been on silent running mode. It's unbelievable. Like they really need to look into that technology and figure out what made that possible. You know, because just think about it. If a Navy could have that kind of firepower underwater with absolutely no noise whatsoever, and not even a single living soul on board, I mean, that is game-changing.
Man, the Russians would have the best submarine fleet in the world if they'd sink all their boats right now.
They would. They would. Yeah, and think about it, Matthew. They could even have underwater aircraft carriers like the Kuznetsov. I mean, like, hell, that thing's almost turned into an underwater carrier several times. I'm sure it wouldn't be that hard to turn this thing into an underwater carrier.
Oh, yeah. And look, you can even do BMX tricks off the side underwater, too.
Yeah, you could, couldn't you? And also, you got the sick ramp, so that way you could jump over, like, the 10 school buses that'll line up in the stadium here in Kentucky. I mean, like, it's perfect. Thing's perfect.
Yes.
But, man, I mean, this thing's ugly, not going to lie.
It really is ugly. I saw a report that they tried to copy one of our aircraft carriers with its design, but I'm not sure if I believe that.
Hell no. I mean, like, none of our carriers ever had this elevated launch ramp on the front of the carrier, so I think that's probably a straight up lie because, well, whoever said that is straight up lying because there is no way in hell this thing has any design similarities to an American aircraft carrier. The only thing I could imagine is the angled, I guess you could say, flight deck. But that's not that's like normal on every single aircraft carrier in the world. You know, once people realized that you could probably save pilots' lives by having an angled flight deck, everyone did that at the same time. So, still, I mean, like, it's crazy to think that they could turn this thing into an underwater carrier at any minute. All they have to do is get that thing out of the dry dock, sail it into the Arctic Ocean, and then torp it, and it'll go down, and it'll become the next greatest submarine of the Russian Navy. Anyways, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of news in Odessa and on into our location unknowns. And we have a couple of interesting ones today. I always make sure that our location unknowns are as interesting as they can be. We actually kind of pick and choose what gets in the location unknowns and omit some that are not that interesting. But starting off with our first clip, we saw a Russian using divine intervention today to try and save himself from a drone bombing. So we can hear the hip-hop jazz that you hear in a New York cafe as this Russian runs down the trench and the drone follows him. He's not really moving at an incredibly fast speed. And the drone is, of course, just following right behind him. In fact, overspeeding him. And now we can see the Russian dive into a hole, and he starts grabbing at his pants, and he's jerking around quite violently, kind of a little weird of a look, not that great of a look. But he pulls out a picture, and it appears to be... I can't really tell what that is. It honestly looks like Rick Astley from the Never Gonna Give You Up video, but he pulls out a picture right there and holds it above his head, and the drone does not drop its bomb. Now, the video caption says this is some kind of a attempt at divine intervention or something similar. I don't really know what that picture is, but it is interesting to see him try and save himself with a picture, because the thing had a bomb and wanted to drop it on him. I think it just would. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into the next one, where we saw the Ukrainians trying out a new cartridge feeding system for light machine guns. Here's the clip. Well, you hear this thing firing, and you can hear the little beep of my space heater in the background because it's getting too hot in here. And what you're seeing is that they have this interesting, I guess the best thing I could explain this is if you've ever seen an M134 minigun mounted onto the side of a helicopter, they usually have this metal kind of a chain guidance thing that takes the belt and it gets fed through this thing. And what you see right here is the exact same thing. It's covered with a camouflage wrapping, and it pretty much feeds the machine gun the exact same way. All the ammunition is stored in this backpack. You see him continuing to fire, and it appears that it's not jamming, and it's also pretty impressive to see the machine gun isn't jamming as well. You now see him placing it down, and then seeing the clip. But very interesting to see. We've seen this thing being trialed several times at this point by the Ukrainian army, and it seems as though they are giving very serious consideration to trying to implement this for light machine gunners in the Ukrainian army. They have not implemented it yet from what we've seen. We haven't seen this thing on the front line, but we continuously see this thing on training fields and being tested out, which may show that the Ukrainians are seriously considering this system, as it may improve the ability for an M240 machine gunner to lay down fire more effectively. We're now going to be moving on from that clip of Location Unknown News and on into our next one, where we saw an FPV drone getting a good hit. And we can hear the dope, and so we're going to mute the dope, and we're going to let the FPV drone do its thing. Once again, we can see the clotheslines hanging off the front of it, or the clothes hangers. And we can now see a little Russian Scooby-Doo van, it seems, racing down a road, but the FPV drone can race even faster. You see it getting in front of the Scooby-Doo van and now running right into it. And we can now see, I think it's replaying this again in slow motion. We're getting an NFL playback here. And it appears that they are crossing the 10-yard line, and it's a touchdown. It's a touchdown for Ukraine Central University. Oh my God, it's unbelievable. Well, I gotta tell you, Hal, after they hit that Hail Mary and just sent it straight into the touchdown zone, I knew it was gonna be over. Those Russians were toast and quite literally burned by this defeat. Of course, though, we can see the FPV drone slam straight into the front of the Scooby-Doo van, and the last thing we heard from inside that van was "Ruh-roh," and then it just blew up. Anyways, we're going to be moving on from that clip and on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we saw a Ukrainian sniper hitting a Russian. We can see the Russian just walking, and we can see the Ukrainian firing, and we can now see the Russian go down. It looks like a free nap is on his way. With that, that's the end of the clip, but great to see that they were able to get another Russian, and that the snipers are, of course, accurate enough to almost always hit their shots, at least from what we see on film. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our last bit of location unknown news, and this is a fairly interesting bit. We saw the Russian casualty report for today. And so,
I see one Bobcat.
Oh, we're getting new pictures here. Hang on, let's check. We gotta check.
It's an R Syrian. That's a nice Bobcat.
That is a pretty nice one. That one actually has got a fresh paint job. This one, however, this one's seen better days. But anyways,
I don't know how you would even do that.
I don't know either. That's why OSHA exists, I guess. But anyways, with the casualty losses today, we're okay, but they weren't the greatest that we have seen. We saw that 540 Russian soldiers were taken out over the past 24 hours, according to the casualty report on the Kyiv Independent. Not as high as the other day. We saw about 200 being lost the other day. 200 more being lost the other day. So it's good, but it's not the greatest we've seen. We did see 10 armored personnel carriers getting lost over the past 24 hours, however, which is a fairly good number, along with 7 supply trucks, which is around the war's average. However, 0 main battle tanks were destroyed over the past 24 hours, most likely because all of the T-54s broke down before they even left the motor pool, and so there were none available on the front lines to be blown up today, and so we saw that none were lost. We also saw that 7 artillery pieces were destroyed today. That's nearly 2 entire batteries, minus 1 artillery piece. We don't know exactly what kind these are, but of course another 7 lost, which is fairly nice to see. We also saw that 5 drones were shot down over the past 24 hours, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system of an unknown variety. We always give a ballpark estimate, though, that every single anti-aircraft warfare system costs around $15 million, because the most common kinds we see being lost are Tor 1s and Tunguskas, as well as, I believe, Bukes and Kubes, and all of those are within the $15 million price range. So, once again, a pretty okay day in terms of Russian losses. Not the highest we've seen. This isn't getting into the astronomical territories of the past 2 months, but over the war's average, it is not that bad. And so we're going to be moving on from the casualty report and on into the frontline news itself. And we have quite a decent amount, spanning all the way from the northeastern area all the way down to the south near Rykov. But before we get into all of this news, and I got to tell you, it is pretty wild when we get into Bakhmut. We actually watched the Ukrainians blow up some high-rises and take them down today with the Russians inside. But before we get into all of that, and also hear the Russians giving orders to execute deserters, we have to get into the polls, because these polls seem to be a little contended tonight, especially the one that I'm seeing right now. But before I get into them myself, let's hand it over to Matthew and let him guide us through them. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and for our first question segment tonight, we have 3 polls to address like usual, and the very first one says, the FBI arrested a 21-year-old airman in connection with leaked classified documents, and what are your thoughts? 44% said, he must have done it. 10% said unsure, 16% said something seemed suspicious, and 30% said innocent until proven guilty. And I have to say, I wholeheartedly believe that everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and me personally, it makes me kind of disappointed to see so many people jump into conclusions on this, because while we have a good justice system, it's not perfect. So we're not really sure exactly what the details are here, and until we know, it's way too early to make a conclusion at this point. But if it was true and he did do it, I do support very severe consequences for the kid, because we have to set an example that you cannot leak classified documents and simply walk scot-free. But like I said, it's way too early to tell. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to also largely agree that people are innocent in this country until proven guilty. It works different in other countries. In Japan, you are largely guilty until proven innocent. In Russia, you're also guilty until proven innocent as well. If the government has you arrested on the charges of a crime, you're pretty much already going to jail, and there's a very small chance that you will be let out as an innocent free man. That's one thing that I think is very important to always remember about the United States, is that no matter what, no matter how serious the charge, someone is innocent until proven guilty. This man is being arrested right now for the alleged crime that he has disclosed classified documents from the U.S. government. And I think that is very important to remember, that people can't sit there and mob someone and say that they are guilty of something without them being given the due process of the court system. If we ran our country like that, imagine if, for example, what if the government tomorrow went anti-Ukrainian? Every single one of y'all could possibly be arrested on trumped-up charges that really have nothing to do with anything, and you're pretty much going to the slammer already because the mob that backs up the government sits there and says you're guilty and you ought to go to jail. I don't think that we should ever run the court system that way. I don't think that it's something that should be encouraged in the public for people to say that someone's just guilty flat out. As soon as they get arrested, they are guilty. That's not a good way to run things. So I would say that the guy is innocent until proven guilty. But once again, if the guy did commit the crime, he's committed a very serious act against the United States. It is treason. And I would say that if he has committed the crime and he is guilty, and once a court looks over the information, they find that to be the case, and a jury does, I think that he should be given the maximum sentence, even if it is a little bit more severe than people think, because we should not have people in the United States conducting treason against this country. That is a very bad precedent to set, and whoever does that should be facing the most severe punishments and charges possible. But once again, we have to wait for the information to make its way to the courts and for the trial to actually be held for the jury to make their decision. So with that...
Also, one other thing I've seen people mention, yes, he was in the military, so the UCMJ would apply to him. But at this point, it looks like the FBI has arrested him, and it looks like he's going to be charged with a federal crime. My guess would be, just a layman's guess, he's probably going to be charged under the Espionage Act, which is the U.S. Code. So I'm not sure if they're going to try to charge him under the UCMJ. It seems like they probably would. And something tells me they haven't quite completed their investigation all the way to be able to actually go ahead and do that. So I'll be interested to see what happens in the future.
And also another thing I would have to say is that one thing that started to happen a lot in this country over the past few years is that people decide in their heads that someone's guilty or innocent, and then if the jury decides the opposite of whatever people have decided in their heads, getting no evidence whatsoever, they say the jury's wrong. I think it's very important. It is a very important part of a democratic country like the United States that we trust a jury's decision to be the right decision, regardless whether one personally agrees or disagrees with it. That jury will be getting all of the information, whether it be a jury that's run by the Department of Defense and a court-martial, or whether it be one that's held by the federal government in the district where that crime occurred. It is very important to always remember that the jury will have the final say, and the country must respect what the jury's decision is if this man is charged and brought to a trial. So, in my opinion, of course, at the moment, looks like pretty bad stuff. He was on the Discord server, but that has come out. But we don't know if he's the actual guy who disseminated the information or if he was just there and a part of the military and didn't report it. That would still be a crime if he did not report it. I believe he is obligated, since he is a member of the military, to report that kind of stuff to the government if seen. But once again, we have to wait for it to go to trial and see if he is actually guilty or innocent according to the jury that he's given. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll we have says, allegedly, China approved lethal aid to Russia earlier this year and disguised as civilian items. And what are your thoughts? 47% said this is why the USA was warning China. 40% said not good, it's probably on the way. 8% said unsure, and 6% said, it probably never reached Russia. And this makes a whole lot of sense now, because the U.S. has known about this for a few months now, according to the leaked documents. So this is why the Department of State was warning China so heavily not to go ahead and make the decision to send military weapons to Russia, because they knew this was in the works. Now, we don't know if the weapons have arrived in Russia or not. I would assume that since they went ahead and approved it, that they're probably either on the way or already there, but we don't know. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, can you reread that prompt real quick, because I want to make sure the wordage is correct.
Yes, it says, allegedly, China approved lethal aid to Russia earlier this year, and it was disguised as civilian items. And what are your thoughts?
I would say that that's pretty sneaky of the Chinese. Apparently, it must have not been anything substantial if it can be disguised, because tanks and things like that, they can't be disguised as civilian aid. Hey man, what's that tank for? humanitarian reasons. I don't think they were doing anything like that. So it must have been somewhat smaller aid, but I think that shows that the Chinese are scared of Western repercussions, considering that they would camouflage the military equipment as some kind of civilian aid. So with that, I hope that does address that poll the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our last poll says a Russian mine exploded near the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and the IAEA says mines are everywhere around the power plant. And what are your thoughts? 55% said that's not good. It's a ticking time bomb. 7% said unsure. 27% said it's risky but not critical. And 11% said it's fine. It's been like that. And I would say that even if it's been like that, that's definitely not good. You don't want mines around a nuclear facility anywhere close to it. And like I've been saying for quite some time, we need to do something and intervene about that power plant, because if it blows up or has some kind of failure, that's going to affect a lot more than just Ukraine. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, before we get to that, that there is a guy in here called David Zimmerman who's saying that they have evidence the guy is just guilty. I don't know if you know how the justice system works, but you don't make that decision, a jury does. And look, there he goes again. Do you see that? Stop defending us. You know he's innocent. That's how the justice system works. Do you not understand?
He wouldn't make a good lawyer.
Yeah, that guy would not make a good lawyer.
Don't even go into criminal defense.
Man, he would not be a good defense attorney. Your Honor, he's here in court. He's guilty. I mean, like, that's how he would work.
He's guilty. Send him to jail.
Yeah.
Put him under the jail.
Yeah, put him under the jail. Now, I'll say this, okay? The guy is innocent until proven guilty. That's how the justice system works. If he's found guilty, in my opinion, if the death penalty is applicable on the federal level, I say the guy ought to be executed, because I think that treason is the highest crime you can really commit. You're betraying the entire nation of 350 million people that live here. But the guy's not guilty yet. He has to go through a trial. Even if it is a court-martial, in a court-martial, you are still innocent until proven guilty. That would make no sense for the United States to have based itself on foundations of trial by peers and innocent until proven guilty, and then the U.S. Code of Military Justice says you're guilty until proven innocent. That would be the complete opposite. I don't live in an authoritarian dictatorship where people are guilty if they're arrested or looked at by the government. We don't live in a country like that. We live in a country where everyone's given due process and everyone is innocent until the government or the prosecutor can prove that they are in fact guilty without a shadow of a doubt. Or I guess you could say, what would it actually be the term for that, Matthew? I'm trying to think of it, but I can't think of it. Overwhelming
And
evidence.
the term you're looking for is, yeah, you can go with that.
Yeah, we'll
beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt, then you're guilty. If it can't be proved beyond a reasonable doubt, you're innocent. That's the way this court system works. And I see someone. I see
guilty, but yeah.
Well, yeah, he's innocent without a doubt. Yeah, sorry, I said it wrong. But if people keep on bringing up, well, I mean, OJ. Okay, what about it? Are we supposed to go and make everyone guilty now? I mean, people always sit there and go, hey, this guy was innocent. He didn't do nothing wrong. And they put him in prison for 40 years. Well, I mean, according to what y'all are saying now, he was guilty anyways when he was arrested. And there shouldn't have been a trial. He was just guilty anyways. But anyways, with that, let's hear that poll one more time, because it blows me away. It blows me away to hear people in America just throwing away their own constitutional rights to be innocent until proven guilty and to have a trial and just go, oh, he's guilty. Because then that means if you're ever charged with a crime, you're guilty automatically as well.
Also, I see some folks saying a preponderance of the evidence. That's in a civil case, but in a criminal case, it's beyond a reasonable doubt is the standard. But the poll said a Russian mine exploded near Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and mines are supposedly everywhere around the plant. And what are your thoughts?
I would say that is very concerning. Of course, the mines are not going to blow up in the reactor and cause it to have a meltdown, but it is still very concerning to hear that there are landmines around a nuclear power plant. That's certainly not safe sounding. And I would say that it is becoming a ticking time bomb at this point for sure. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll, so we're moving on to our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a $50 donation from none other than Jesus UCSB. And it's good to see you again, Jesus. He says, Hola. Today I was tweeting about Jack. LOL, as y'all saw. LOL, sorry, I was a mad NAFO Mexican tanker. But it's all love. If you watch Fury, the movie, us tankers, we go 0 to 100 quick, but all good. LSA Army, and Jesus UCSB loves you. And real quick, before Enforcer answers that question, Jesus, I did see you tweeting on Twitter, and I have to say, I do understand where you're coming from, because if the kid did leak those documents, that should not be just simply brushed under the rug. And sadly, the kid is going to be made an example out of. But, not to repeat it again, but we just have to wait until we have all the evidence and know all the facts before we can jump to a conclusion. But I do understand where you're coming from. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you for the support, Jesus UCSB. And of course, people have opinions as to whether the guy is guilty or not. But I don't think the country should run that way on in the court system, where if you're arrested and you get put in it, it's really just a matter of formality at that point that you're there, because you're already guilty. And I think that's something that's got to be heavily defended against. And I don't think people get it or not, like that David Zimmerman guy. If he is guilty already, that means that you could be found guilty of any crime at any moment just because you're arrested, and they could put you under the prison for anything without really even giving you a trial. I think it's very important. Of course, the evidence right now, from what we've seen publicly, it does look fairly damning for the guy. It looks like he was involved in it in some way, shape, or form. But once again, who's to say that he wasn't? Who's to say that this guy was just a member of the Discord and he didn't do anything there? He was completely inactive when all of this happened over the past few months. I mean, hell, on my Discord server, I hardly popped in there, but maybe like once every 2 months or so. Something could have happened in the course of those 2 months, and people would say I'm guilty of doing something or supporting something, and I was hardly even there. That would be something similar to that. And then people would be going, oh, he's guilty, although I had nothing to do with it. There's a lot of circumstances that could surround this where this guy is innocent, or it could be that he is completely guilty. And if he's guilty, I believe he should get the most severe, I guess you could say, sentencing possible, because treason is the most serious thing you can do against the nation, against the citizenry itself. But I don't think for a minute that we should all go and immediately go and beat this guy into the ground and kill him, pretty much, because of what he's been, I guess you could say, accused of or being arrested for right now. They haven't even charged the guy formally yet. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, I have to say this because I just don't get it. I still see some people saying the guy is guilty. If you're saying that, then you're wanting the government to come to your door, knock on it, arrest you immediately, and for everyone to say that you're guilty of whatever the government is accusing you of at that moment, or whatever they're arresting you for. You're automatically guilty. You don't get any say. Even if you're not guilty, you are just guilty, and they're going to treat you like that. That's not a good thing. And really think about that for a minute. Put yourself in those shoes where that's happening to you, and you may not be guilty of that crime, and think about how messed up that would be, that you were already guilty and there's nothing you can do just because they came and arrested you. So with that, I hope that does.
Now, one question I do have is, I see that we have a lot of lawyers in the chat. Like, that's not sarcastic. We actually have quite a few actual lawyers down here. I don't know the answer to this question. It might sound ignorant, but what are the odds that this case gets put into, for example, like a secret proceeding, a secret trial where it's not open to the public because it involves classified documents? I want to know what the odds of that happening are.
And so we'll wait for that answer. But of course, thank you for the support, Jesus UCSB. I'm not saying that, and I'm not being militant about it. It's just that it blows me away when I hear people giving up practically a right that you have in this country to try and get a guy because they heard some circumstantial information and they just want him put under the ground. So with that, thank you for the support, Jesus. I hope that does address that fairly well. No problem at all. It's just that I feel very strongly about rights that you are supposed to have that are protected under the government or under the Constitution or your state laws. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and the next super chat goes to ABCD, who puts in a $20 donation and says, why isn't the Republic of Moldova reuniting with Romania as they were before the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939? If reuniting with Romania, wouldn't Moldova become part of NATO automatically?
And that is an excellent question. And the reason why is because when Moldova was created as an independent country under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Act, from then forward, it existed as an independent country throughout the Soviet Union. And then once the Soviet Union dissolved, it still existed as an independent country. And so for about the past, like 8 decades, this country has existed with its own power structure, with its own government. And therefore, with its own power structure, comes people that would not want to lose that power. And if Moldova reintegrated itself into Romania and became a part of Romania, the people who have spent their entire lives building up the power they have in Moldova would lose it overnight. Unless there was some way that Moldova would still be a semi-autonomous country and they would still have some control over it. That's really the only way they could keep that kind of power. And one thing you have to understand is that people do not want to give up power, no matter how logical it seems or how beneficial it would be in some instances to probably take the Moldovans and reintegrate them into Romania. These people do not want to lose their power. That's why you see a lot of integrations that don't happen. Usually you see splits because there are it's a very minute difference sometimes between two groups, and you'll see them split. Like, for example, a very common split that's always coming up every once in a while is Scotland splitting from the United Kingdom. Somewhat similar people, and I say that with very loosely because Scottish people hate the English. The English hate the Scottish, and then everyone hates each other on the British Isles. You can just be in a village 5 miles away from another, and they probably hate each other. But anyways, it's a slight difference, just slight enough that they would be willing to break away. And there's a power structure that does exist in Scotland that is somewhat autonomous or separate from the rest of Britain. And it's kind of similar to that with Moldova, but it's already been separated for nearly 8 decades. And these people certainly do not want to give up their power and everything that they've strived and lived in for pretty much to Romania for the most part. That's most likely the reason why. And so with that, I thank you once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our last one of the segment goes to Avir Anthony, who puts in a massive, very generous $200 super chat. And Avir, thank you very much for supporting the channel very generously. And he says, please take a question from the chat, and thanks for all you both do.
And thank you so much for the massive amount of support of Eric. That is unbelievable. And I thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to take a question from the chat here. And thank you so much for supporting us so that way we can keep doing all we do. Of course, thanks to y'all and thanks to support like that, we're able to keep this thing ad-free, sponsor-free, and we're able to say whatever we want, whenever we want. And that's a huge liberty that many people on YouTube do not have the ability of. They either have to appease sponsors, they have to make sure that they don't appease YouTube and that their ads can run unfettered. There is a lot of restrictions to what people can say, so that way they can make sure to keep themselves afloat to keep being able to do this. And thanks to y'all, we have never had to worry about appeasing a sponsor or appeasing YouTube's AdSense policies to keep this thing running. And I got to thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support and helping the Enforcer channel to keep on running the way it's been running for 414 days. And so with that, let's get to that live chat.
All right, and the live chat goes to, let's see here, it's going to go to Bogdan, who says, so what would the impact of the leaked documents be on the AFU offensive?
And let's see, can you reread that one again?
He says, what would the impact of the leaked documents be on the AFU offensive?
We haven't really seen that there would be any large impact to the Ukrainian offensive because the documents that were leaked, from what I understand, did not go into Ukrainian offensive plans. It just went into Western support to Ukraine. And it's public information at the moment that the Ukrainians are raising 9 brand new brigades, and we knew that before the classified documents even started to circle around the mainstream. There were 9 new brigades being raised in Ukraine using mostly Western weaponry that would be used in a counteroffensive that's coming up. So that information wasn't really sensitive. The counteroffensive itself had been known about for months at this point. We just didn't know the direction it was going in, and those documents didn't disclose it either. So as far as the classified documents leak went, yeah, it did disclose sensitive information about our support to Ukraine and where it is and how much of it there really is at that one given moment, but it didn't really divulge anything sensitive to the Ukrainian war effort on the battlefield itself. So that's why you haven't really seen a lot of Ukrainian outrage on this one. You know, of course, they've said that that's not a great thing to have that kind of information put out there, but you haven't seen them asking for this guy's head because while it, you know, it kind of affects the Ukrainian in a little bit of a way, it more so affected the classified materials that the United States was publishing to people in the DoD, and also the equipment that we were sending to Ukraine and where exactly it is in Poland and where it is in some places in Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that does answer that live chat fairly well. And thank you so much once again to Vera for helping to support this channel and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And with that, We're now going to be moving out of that question segment and on into the frontline news itself, starting off in the Northeast. Over the past 24 hours, we've seen absolutely nothing change. As a matter of fact, we've seen nothing change to the point that I refreshed this map 10 minutes before the stream, and I've just refreshed it right now, and they still have not updated it on Deep State from yesterday. So that tells us how little of a frontline change there's been, is that Deep State isn't even updating the map today. So there's been absolutely no frontline changes in the Northeast. We have seen a small amount of activity, however, in the Kuzmiivka direction. We saw the Ukrainians hitting the Russians hard, real hard. In fact, it was hard enough that you could call these guys your uncle, because they were hitting them heavy. So we can see the Ukrainian machine gunner right here, and we can see that he's got a PKP, well, let me think, it's a PKM, sorry, PKM, right there on a sandbag. I mean, you see them waiting, and what they're waiting for is that right now in front of them, to the left side of the camera, there is a Russian squad advancing through the open field towards their position with practically no support. They're going to wait for the signal here, which is going to be an RPG flying over their heads, and then this guy climbs up, and he starts laying down the fire on the Russians. You now see them getting another RPG ready and firing it as well. Oh shit. And we now see him getting back down. Russians pinned down in the field now as they fire another rocket right overhead. And that's the end of the clip. Now that is pretty wild to see. They got those guys right in the open before they started firing, which was really smart, because if they had fired right when they were getting out of their trench works, they probably would have just gotten right back in their trenches. Instead, they waited for them to get halfway through the field, and then they started firing on them. A very smart move, and probably inflicting a decent amount of casualties and causing that assault to fail. We're now going to be moving on from that clip and further on down the line towards Chernopopivka, where we saw the 53rd holding off an attack. So we're going to have to mute that, but we can see the 53rd Brigade's tank right here in the tree line. And this tank is about to be committing some real serious armored warfare. We see the tank sitting there, and we can now see it firing and hitting the berm on the other side of the field. And we can see what appears to be a Russian tank right there, and maybe a Russian tank right there. I can't really tell exactly at this moment. But you see a shell explode behind the Ukrainian tank. But the Ukrainian tank is completely unfazed and is lining up another shot for the Russian tanks on the other side of the field. We can see an artillery shell exploding to the right side of the screen. The Ukrainian tank is now fired, and it appears that the round has exploded somewhere near the Russian tank. We can see a large amount of smoke. We're not exactly able to tell at the moment if the tank was hit. Nope, correction, the tank has been hit. The Ukrainian tank did hit the Russian tank head-on, and it appears it is beginning to smoke. A lucky strike, of course. Only the finest cigarette
irresponsibly.
You know they got to smoke irresponsibly. And we can see it getting hit a second time. We can see a small fire breaking out of the tank. May actually be going into the crew compartment. And it appears that the Ukrainians are winning the day in this tank battle. A true... Oh, yeah, they have. There goes the crew. Oh my god, there goes like a whole squad with them. That's at the infantry squad. It's like, we have no anti-tank now. So they're all running. And the 53rd got these guys good. And you see the tank still smoking over there from the 2 hits it took. And we see the Russians collapsing over here in the field. We're not really sure why. But we can see that their tank was destroyed. Quite brutal to watch. We rarely ever see armored warfare like this unfold in Ukraine, where it's a tank-on-tank battle, and yet this Ukrainian tank just faced down a Russian one and destroyed it. Actually, that appears to be a BMP-1. So it appears that the T-80 series tank that the Ukrainians were using was able to take out a BMP-1. Still pretty impressive and nice to see. We're going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next one towards the area of Rubizhny, where we saw a Russian jamming system get destroyed today as well. Jamming systems are quite rare and also very expensive for both sides to field, and so seeing one of these destroyed is definitely leading to have an impact on the Russian armed forces. We can see the jamming system right here set up in a dugout, and we can see some Russians wandering around. We can also see another vehicle over here. I'm not really sure what that one is, but we're about to see him get blown up. We can see right here the 2 vehicles once again near the dugout. And any second now, we're about to see the shell come in right there, scattering shrapnel across the area and taking out both of the vehicles. Very nice to see. Always love to see it. It's great to see, and it's good to know the Russians lost another rare vehicle such as that one. Speaking of rare, the Russians are getting their rear ends seared rare by the Ukrainians right now in the city of Bakhmut, and they're getting absolutely wiped out. We haven't seen them make any advances from what we understand today, and it appears that the Ukrainians are in fact holding the train station that they were able to fight back from the Russians the other day. And so moving on up into the northern area near Krasnopolivka and moving on down into the city itself, we saw the 45th Artillery Brigade able to hit a Russian ammo storage. So we're going to mute that. And we can see the Skladveke right there, which most likely means ammo depot. And we can see them hit it. And we can see it now sputtering out a small flame. We can now see it exploding a little bit more. And I gotta say, this thing is juice. Not the kind of juice you'd want to drink, but it's certainly juice. You know, I don't even know where the hell I came up with that phrase, man. I've been using that for like, what, 200 days? I've never heard anyone in the world say juice.
What does it even mean?
I don't even know. I just, like, I say straight up juice whenever anything good happens. I don't even know where in the world that came from. If anyone could track back the first time I ever said that's pure juice, I would love to know, because I sat there and just thought about that introspectively. I was like, what the hell do I even mean by that? But anyways, that's the end of the clip, and we can see that the 45th Brigade blew away another supply depot, which is, of course, excellent. We're now going to be moving on from that area of the front line towards Krasnopolivka and on down towards the area of Blahodotny, where we saw the 3rd Brigade pushing the Russians back with a large armored assault. So we're going to mute this. You know, that would honestly be a nice poll for you to run, Matthew. Do y'all like the term juice? You know, just like put juice in quotations and see if people like it. Because if they do, it'll most likely stay around. But I just realized, to me, I was like, I don't even realize what kind of sense that really makes. So I was like, why am I saying that? Anyways, we can see.
I think that means something else in like the UK. If you say somebody is juice, so like
really,
that means something else. Yeah, I think that means they're doing the roids.
Oh, well, I don't mean that, but we can see the 3rd Brigade advancing down here. We can see them moving with a massive tanks and armored personnel carriers behind them as they blast away Russian positions and then immediately start moving Ukrainian squads into the Russian trench works supported by the armor to clear it on out. Quite a nice advance. It was very well put together. We can now see the APCs and the tanks backing up and giving the infantry a little bit more breathing room to conduct the assault on the trench. Oh, Jay Bagwell! Oh my god, actually, yeah, that was where it came from. Oh my god, that's where it came from, Jay. He got it right. He knows where it came from. Yeah, it just reminded me. There was an SNL skit. I'd show it, but they copyright strike us. There was an SNL skit with a guy who played George Costanza in Seinfeld, and he went to this Greek restaurant and got a gyro, and he was like, man, the juice is good. And he was like, excuse me, can I get some more juice? And they were like, you like it, the juice. And they said, and like the whole skit was them literally just saying, oh, you like it, the juice, huh? And then they would like get the next guy, hey, Fanny, he like it, the juice. And like that was it. And I think, if I remember correctly, I saw that, and I was like, huh, that's kind of funny. So then that's when I came on stream and said that this is juice. Because I was thinking of that juice. So Jay Bagwell actually activated all the neurons in my head in the right pattern for me to remember where that did come from. That's where it came from.
That was the trigger word right there.
Yeah,
Jay just did it.
The Manchurian candidate. Now I gotta go to Ukraine. But anyways, we can see the infantry moving forward. We can see the APCs and the tank backing on up. I gotta thank Jay Bagwell for coming in clutch there and helping me to remember where that term did come from. But with that's the end of the clip, and it's great to see that the 3rd Brigade is conducting a push in the northern area of the battlefield and making sure to clear out Russians there, maybe showing that the Ukrainians are in fact conducting offensives now that they've been able to regain a small amount of initiative within the city itself. We're now going to be moving on to another clip from the 3rd Brigade where we saw a picture of a machine gun post looking over the hills and fields of Ukraine out in this area. And this is in a similar direction that the 3rd Brigade was working in the previous video. It is in the northern flank, and we can see right here, it appears that they have an M249 set up on the spot, and they're just overlooking the fields. Really neat to see, and of course great to know that the 3rd Brigade is the one holding the lines up there. They've done a very good job throughout most of the war, and hopefully will continue to push the Russians back as we saw in the last video. We're now going to be moving on into the northern area of Bakhmut itself, where we saw an interesting sight. What we're about to watch is a Ukrainian taking a video of a captured Russian comm system, and over this comm system, we're going to be hearing something very interesting from the Russian armed forces, showing how bad off the morale is for the Russian army during this current battle, and also how badly yesterday's battle has affected the Russian forces fighting in the city. So here's the clip. Whoever retreats, order to group commanders, kill, effing kill them. Guys, we're not retreating, we're only moving forward. Either we start fighting now and F them up, or we will F and die. Choose for yourself how you want to live. Either we live or rot in a grave. How do you copy? Roger that. And so right there we can see that apparently it may be a battalion or even a more so a brigade commander has gotten on the radio and is telling his people, or he got that word from the brigade and it's gone down to his level. He's telling his people there is no more pulling back. If Russian soldiers are seen getting up from their positions and routing off the field, the commander is to execute them on the spot. That is an enemy at the gates kind of thing. In case y'all didn't pick up on that, they're probably going to have barrier units in Bakhmut now stopping the Russian forces from retreating off of the line, even if they are completely broken. That's wild. And you know what's crazy is that when the movie Enemy at the Gates came out, and I'll pull that up for y'all, a lot of people said this is a complete historical fallacy. There's nothing true about this movie whatsoever. And so I'll try and get it right here in case y'all remember some of the pictures from this movie. What a lot of people said is that the Russians mowing down Soviet troops inside of Stalingrad when they retreated, just not true. They wouldn't have done that because everyone would have been demoralized. And I've got to say, considering the current situation in this war, and how many times we've heard the Russians get into desperate situations like these, and heard them giving orders to execute deserters, I would have to say it can't be that far from the truth that they also executed deserting units and routing units inside the city of Stalingrad as well. It can't be that far out of the picture because it's happening now. And if it was happening now, I could definitely easily imagine it would be happening in a city like Stalingrad. So insane to hear, and it gives us an idea that that battle yesterday where the Russians got blown away on the railroad station and then pushed back must have caused them a great deal of damage to the already fragile offensive that they've been slowly pushing through Bakhmut over the past few months. Moving into the city itself, we also saw some pictures from the battlefield today, once again showing how devastated the city is and how tough the fighting has been. We can see some Ukrainian soldiers in some dugouts looking over in the distance. We can see this is taken through a camouflage net near a destroyed house. In the last picture, we can see Ukrainians moving down a dirt road on an APC. It looks like it may be a BRDM2, but we can't really tell. Still giving a little bit of a look at what's going on near the northern area of the city. Moving on more towards the city center, we also saw some drone footage of the battle of the train station that occurred yesterday and is still occurring in a smaller scale today. We can see all of the smoke and fires billowing out of the buildings where all of this heavy fighting has been occurring, and we can also see the train station right there as well. And we can see that this battle was certainly a tough fought one. Explosions, fires, and gunfire is coming from just about every single area around the train station, and somehow through this all, the Ukrainians would become the victors of this battle, able to push the Russians off the railroad station and back across to the other side. And you can see some of the dust being kicked up from bullets that are hitting the buildings, explosions rocking them as well. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But as you can see right there, that was a small look, and not really that great of a one, but you could just see all the fires and the smoke billowing out of that battlefield as the Ukrainians would actually change the course of the battle, at least for today and yesterday, by pushing the Russians out and causing around 300 Russian dead over the course of 24 hours in this one battlefield. We're now going to be moving on from that clip and on into our next one, where we also got to see the sheer destruction of Bakhmut and how heavy this fighting has really been. Of course, the Ukrainians and the Russians have been fighting block for block, street for street, since the beginning of the Battle of Bakhmut and when Russian forces finally made it into the city, and we can see that this has certainly taken its toll on every single part of the city. Nearly everything has been destroyed. Right there we can see the city administration building the Russians planted their flag on, completely destroyed. And we can see them flying over the parks and buildings, of course most of them missing their roofs, and some missing entire walls and facades. Sorry for the graphic quality. This is the best graphic quality we could get for this video. We can see right here.
It's finding some good drone flying, though, by the way.
Yeah, I gotta say, it's an impressive drone flying. Every single building has been burned. Every single building has been destroyed. There's the electronics store that was famously known during earlier parts of the battle. Well, you see this building's been burned out entirely. Not even a single floor exists in it still. And I gotta say, this is really some impressive flying skills right here, taken by this drone pilot. And we can see the destruction here once again in a building completely destroyed down the center. It appears that an artillery shell may have hit it and collapsed the inner floors, leading to the entire building to collapse down that area. And we can see over here once again, buildings completely destroyed throughout. But I gotta tell you, whoever this drone pilot is, if he survives the war, he needs to do professional drone camera work. Because if he was given a 4K Ultra HD camera on this drone, he could film just about anything. This was impressive. It was almost mesmerizing to watch, but at the same time, it can't be forgotten what he is filming, which is the complete destruction of a city that once housed 71,000 people under the roofs and buildings that are now completely destroyed and leveled throughout the area. We're now going to be moving on from that little picture, once again showing the heroic stand that the Ukrainians have made in the city. They have truly given the Russians a run for their money, such a run for their money, that the Russians have practically had to destroy the town to even try and get the Ukrainians out of a single city block. We're now going to be moving on into the next bit, where we also saw a T-90M in operation in Bakhmut. A somewhat rarer sight. We have adjusted our numbers. During the early part of the war, we thought the Russians only had 30 of these MBTs. Now we understand the number is somewhere in the range of 50. However, 16 to 17 of these MBTs have been destroyed, and we've seen one of the still operating examples operating in Bakhmut today. We can see a very interesting example of showing the weakest part of the tank to the enemy once more. The Russians never learned that you're supposed to point the front of the tank towards where you think the fire is coming from instead of the side, because the side's the weaker part, and it means the frontal armor is completely useless, and that's usually where it's the strongest.
This is their strategy. They said, the commander said never to give in to the enemy, so they never learn.
Yeah. You see it firing again. Oh wow, look, they highlighted the little armor tiles. Wow, look at him shake, Matthew. Look at the jiggle physics.
That's so impressive.
Impressive, amazing. You would think that this was like a 3D model or something. But I'll put money on this. This thing will get destroyed before the end of the month. I'm betting you. If it's in Bakhmut,
sure.
This thing's gone. So we're probably going to see this thing in another video in maybe 3 weeks' time, burning to a crisp in the middle of the street, probably having a turret toss, but still, there is a T-90M today operating in Bakhmut, which must be telling us how desperate the situation is, because we've never seen video evidence of the T-90Ms that have been alluded to be in the Bakhmut area ever operating within the city itself. This is the first time we've ever seen that. We're now moving into the next clip, where we saw where the Russian losses may be coming from. You see, this has never really been explained to anyone well outside the city of Bakhmut, and we've never really seen this before, but the Ukrainians are actually rigging some of the skyscrapers, well, more of the high-rises, to detonate through a controlled detonation whenever the Russians enter the buildings. So, from what we understand right now in this video clip, there's either a squad or a platoon or maybe even an entire company of Russian soldiers that has entered this Khrushchevka building right here, and the Ukrainians have rigged key parts of the building, key structural elements, with explosives, so that way once the Russians run inside, they just blow the whole thing up and it comes down. And we're about to watch that happen, right there.
Dang, the whole tower came
The
down.
whole thing! They brought in some serious demolition guys to get that done that quickly. And we can see them doing it to a second building as well.
That probably took some decent amount of time to rig that up properly for it to actually just fall down to the ground like that.
Yeah. You know, the Russians were sitting there walking into the building going, "Hey, Vadim, you see this giant support column right here? Yeah. Well, they left the ammo bag taped to the wall. That's kind of weird. And it's got a wire on it." Boom. And then the whole building just comes down. Oh, man. I feel sorry for the Russians that were in there, but that's honestly not that bad of a move by the Ukrainians, considering that they are losing these buildings and there's no citizens inside of them any longer, because either they've been evacuated or they weren't there in the first place. That is a really genius move, actually, to just destroy the buildings entirely with demolition charges once the Russians enter them. Really smart,
Yeah, I would
actually.
say.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen anything like that used in the war so far, and I got to say that's certainly a new tactic being used by the Ukrainians on the field. With that, we're going to be moving on from that clip and on into our next one, further behind, in more so in the rear lines of the town, where we saw that the Russians have gotten so upset by the Ukrainians pulling a whole Looney Tunes on them and just destroying the buildings they're running into, and so they started to launch incendiaries at the city. While I lose my track of words or train of thought. We can see the incendiaries raining down on the city. Is it thermite? Is it white phosphorus? We don't really know. It's an
Oh wait, you can actually hear it somewhat too in the video.
Yeah, you can hear like this this fuzzy sound. I guess that's the best way to say it. I don't like the sound that stuff makes. Yeah, I don't like the sound of it. But that's the end of the clip, and we can see right there that the Russians are getting so angered by their slow advance in the city that they'll even go to the point of trying to burn down the remainder of it that they don't control with incendiary weapons. With that, we're going to be moving on out of the city proper itself, as we've covered all the videos in this area, and it appears that the Ukrainians are literally beating them as of the moment right now. And I can't get over the buildings just being blown up with Russians inside of them. I mean, that is a true Looney Tunes move right there, like the dynamite in the house. You run into it, you know, you pick it up and they go, "What in tarnation?" And then it just blows up on them. They come out with like black sooty faces and stuff. That's literally what's happening to the Russians now in Bakhmut, which is hilarious to think about. We're now going to be moving to the highway perimeter, where we saw the Ukrainians once again fighting heavily over the perimeter. Here's the clip.
Колян, помахай, бо тобі на пам'ять. Вася, я їх сюди до теплаків позакидаю. Що, полізли чи що? Так.
You now see them continuing to fire the machine gun.
Несу. РПГ тут, Коля.
We now see him going to the stash and looking around for ammunition. And he's now bringing up something that appeared to have been in a plastic bag. I can't really tell what it is.
Блядь, ножа нема, давай зубами робимо.
You're now hearing an explosion landing close to their trench.
Савчукові магазини прикидав.
Now see them getting an RPG ready.
Та, блядь, іди нахуй.
We now see them finally getting the RPG ready and loading it.
О, МГшка.
We see this other machine gun post here lighting up the Russians. And that's the end of the clip. But once again, giving us a very interesting look at the battles for the highway perimeter. And of course, those brave Ukrainian soldiers are keeping the path clear for more supplies and reinforcements to enter the city. Although there has been alleged rumors today that the Russians were able to push forward one city block and move on to the T-0504 near the MiG monument right here. We have not been able to confirm those reports yet, as live UA and deep state UA do not show this frontline change. However, the Institute for the Study of War has made the assertion that the Russians have taken this small park and the high rises right here. We're still not exactly sure, so we're going to have to hold judgment on that. But if that is the case, the Ukrainians will most likely be conducting a counterattack to take that area, as it is vital to make sure that Ukrainian supplies and reinforcements are still able to enter the city. If this area is cut off, that is no longer possible. We're now going to be moving on from the Bakhmut news in general, because we have covered all of the news today, from the northern flank to the southern flank of the battlefield, and on into Donetsk, where we saw near the area of Vasilivka today a Nona getting destroyed. And some of y'all may ask, how many of these Nonas have been destroyed? And that's Nona your business. We can see the Nona right there. This one is not the, actually, real quick, let me make sure that is a Nona. It's a Nona K. I'm sorry, I thought it was the Nona S SPG, but we can see it get hit right there and destroyed. And it broke apart like a Lego piece. And so that's the end of the clip. Really nice to see, and good to know that.
Wait a minute, wait. Oh my goodness, he clicked off of it.
What, that thing?
Look at that walking trash man wearing like the trash clothes and everything.
I don't know what this means, but it says Gormata. What does Gormata mean? I don't know what that is. Does that mean garbage? Wait, hang on. I gotta go type that in. What is garbage in Russian? Musor. Maybe trash? Nope, that's musor as well. What in the world does that mean? Gormata.
I wonder.
I don't know. What does Garmata mean in Russian? There we go. So let's find this here. Let's see, references Garmata. What does that mean? What does that mean? Oh, it means cannon? I think it means cannon. Well, okay.
Cannon. Huh, that's weird.
What is cannon in Russian? Pushka. Okay, so according to Google Translate, which isn't always accurate, it's Pushka. I'm not really sure. But anyways, a Nona K was destroyed. That's all we need to get out of that, is a Nona K was destroyed. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that crusty sunk, and we're going to be moving on down the front lines to the area of Avdiivka, where we saw the Ukrainians dropping a nade on a Russian vehicle and taking it out with just the nade. We can hear the Matrix Reloaded music playing. Hopefully the attorneys aren't firing up the jet. We can see, of course, the 72nd wrapping the set, and we can now see the BMP-2 right there. We can also see the bomblet swinging below the drone, freely in the air, and now we can see it on its way down. Landing right in the driver's hatch. A hole-in-one shot, especially at that distance, and now the thing's burning. Also, the Russians were very cute with this BMP. They put up a cute little cope cage over the turret. Still doesn't seem to have helped it, but still cute. We can see the BMP-2 burning up to a crisp. And we can see a Russian driving by in a motorcycle with a sidecar. Very classy. That's the end of the clip, and of course the 72nd got another BMP-2 today. We're now going to be moving on further down the lines and into the area of Marinka, where we saw that the Ukrainians were able to add some extra prisoners to the exchange fund, around 6 to 8 of them. Let's make sure to count them. 2, 4, 6. Okay, 6 of them. No, 8, 10. Actually, 10 of them. Correction. Of course, music playing. But we can see the Ukrainians guiding them off the field. And that is 10 extra prisoners that can be exchanged for 10 Ukrainians. And as Hudu Teja says, he says, another one bites the dust. Bun, ba-dun, dun, dun. And this guy right here, man, it looks like he went and found, like, the biggest dustbin you ever could for a vacuum cleaner and just inhaled. Like,
jeez.
I don't know.
It looked like you put on that mask that you've got for, like, reenacting and breathing.
Oh my, yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah, it looks just like it. I wonder how much coal I've inhaled from wearing that gas mask. One will only know, but Anyways.
You're like a miner or something.
No
No pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended. But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip of Marinka. Of course, good to see. And we're now going to be moving down to the southern front near Tokmachka, where we saw the Ukrainians shelling Russian positions. Oh, we can hear a mixtape there.
Chad music.
Come back to life. I've heard that song a million times, so that's actually how it goes for the first part of it. But we can see the Ukrainian artillery hitting right in the trench, causing some ammunition to cook off. And the Ukrainians are giving that shrimp a run for its money. You know, the shrimp that fries the rice? We can see another shell landing on the far left side of the trench, taking out a couple more Russians, and once again detonating more ammo. And a third detonation. It appears that the ammunition is blowing up in chunks inside of that bunker. We can see a fourth one. It's like a fireworks show in that thing. It's just a fireworks show you wouldn't want to be in that bunker with. We can now see another artillery shell land to the far left of the trench. And that's the end of the clip. But a very accurate barrage of Ukrainian mortar fire, except for that last shot, as they were able to get a couple of Russians and detonate their ammo stores in the trench. We're now moving on to our last clip from the area, and we saw some Xi Kings on patrol here. I'm about to turn into Xi Jinping. What's up, Beijing? But anyways, here are some Xi Kings donated by the British to the Ukrainians, and we can see the two of them in operation right here. Of course, we'll have to mute it because this is from the BBC, and as y'all may know or may not know, playing their clip in its entirety would actually be a violation of copyright. But we can see the Sea Kings flying around right here. Really cool helicopter. The British have been using these things for decades, and they've actually been taking them out of the service for the most part. I believe they actually were mothballed in 2017 and have now been given over to the Ukrainians, well, at least these two right here. See them flying over a lake. We can see the BBC crew inside of the helicopter. And he's probably saying something like, this thing is quite old, it's nearly 60 years old, and it can't go up against the impressive Russian whirlybirds that came around from the 1920s. We can see the Sea King right here has landed. We see that the Ukrainians have painted this thing up with the Ukrainian colors. Very nice to see. You now see a Ukrainian soldier giving an interview, probably saying that it's a pretty good helicopter, because it is. I believe that a Sea King helicopter was actually used as Marine One for a pretty good while.
I think it was.
Yeah,
that jacket was fresh, by the way.
Yeah, that jacket was fresh. The freshest thing in that kitchen is this pigeon.
Man, call him Jack the Dripper because he's dripping.
Uh-oh, watch it. We can see the Sea King right there. And we can see a picture of it way back in the day in black and white photography era. We can see it flying over a Force Clyde class, I believe it is. Clyde class, I believe. Destroyer. Or Corvette. I think that's actually a Corvette. We can now see probably a former Sea King pilot giving an interview about the helicopter and seeing it in action over Ukraine. You see the British pilot most likely still talking about it. Sadly, we can't play the audio. And the guy's probably saying something like, you know, I used to eat my big English breakfast on the cockpit. But anyways, you can now see the helicopter in flight over the snowy fields. And I believe that is... Uh-oh. That's not Prince Andrew, is it? Oh, no. I don't
think so.
I'm trying to figure out who the hell that is. Yikes. It's one of the princes, most likely. I would put money on that being one of the princes, but... That's the end of the clip, and very neat to see that the Sea Kings are getting a second life, a second wind in the fields of Ukraine, helping to save Ukrainian lives. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Southern Front news and on out of the Southern Front area, as we've actually covered all of the news in Ukraine today, from north to south, east to west. We've covered everything. And, of course, it is now time for us to move to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Some of y'all may have actually noticed that after we made a very big deal about adding the East Asian news segment to this channel, we didn't include any East Asian news tonight. The reason is that while we know that many of y'all enjoyed it, many of y'all would have loved to have seen that news segment tonight, sadly there just was not enough news that we could really cover in East Asia that would have made it a newsworthy segment. So sadly we weren't able to include one tonight, but if we ever get news, not just in East Asia, but anywhere around the world about diplomatic events or occurrences that become serious enough, we will make sure to report on them and make them their own individual news segment. And so without further ado, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on day 414 of the war in Ukraine.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Коротко про цей день. Перше. Провів військовий кабінет. Особливий формат роботи з керівниками нашого сектору оборони, нашими командувачами, розвідкою, офісом. Лише те, що прямо необхідно для управління передовою і забезпеченням активних дій України, захистом нашої держави від російського терору. Це було змістовно, і наші дії будуть потужними. Готуємо хлопців і дуже чекаємо постачання зброї, обіцяне партнерами. І по максимуму наближаємо перемогу. По максимуму дух єдності, по максимуму ефективність. Підготовка теж по максимуму. Друге. Оборонно-промисловий комплекс. Сьогодні в Маріїнському палаці, де ми завжди вшановуємо тих, хто найбільше зробив для української держави, вперше був відзначений День працівників і працівниць нашого ОПК. Це доволі несправедливо, що досі в Україні не було такого спеціального дня, коли можна було би вшанувати працю усіх тих, хто створює українську зброю, українські снаряди, українську техніку. Хто створює і наші ракети, які так яскраво проявили себе в акваторії Чорного моря у цей день рік тому, 13 квітня, коли зупинився морський шлях російського чорноморського флагмана. Це люди, які створюють наші гармати 155 мм, які зараз на полі бою і щодо яких чуємо лише позитивні відгуки від наших бійців і, зрозуміло, які відгуки окупанта. Звичайно, поки не можна розказати більшості тих позитивів, які досягнуті щодо нашої зброї та наших власних українських снарядів. Не лише за час повномасштабної війни, а й за роки перед нею. Але всій нашій державі, всьому суспільству є за що бути вдячними тим професіоналам, які оберігають і розвивають наш оборонно-промисловий комплекс, які здатні робити для України все – від снаряда до ракети, від артилерії до безпілотників. Напередодні я підписав указ про встановлення в Україні Дня працівника оборонно-промислового комплексу. Саме у цей день, День Нептуна, коли наші ракети вразили Москву. Але дякуємо ми і за ракети, і за десятки інших видів озброєнь, техніки і снарядів, що постачаються обороні. Мав честь нагородити представників і представниць галузі, і впевнений, що українське ОПК завжди буде розвиватися саме так, як розвивається вже кілька років, і в постійному зростанні, у постійному розширенню номенклатур продукції та можливостей галузі. Третє, що важливо за сьогодні – євроінтеграція. Провів нараду з урядовцями, з представниками Верховної Ради щодо деяких наших кроків по наближенню до Євросоюзу, законодавчих кроків реалізації ухвалених змін. Мета нашої держави абсолютно досяжна. Україна буде інтегрованою з усіма інституціями та практиками Євросоюзу, набуде повноправного членства. З нашої сторони повна готовність. Ще одне, підписав указ про нагородження наших воїнів. 4 укази. 349 військовослужбовців відзначені державними нагородами. Серед них 45 бійців повітряних сил, 152 ДШВ, 152 воїни сухопутні війська. Особливо сьогодні я хочу відзначити наших бійців, які б'ються на Донеччині у складі ОСУ Таврія генерала Тарнавського. Зокрема, морських піхотинців 35-ї окремої бригади та артилеристів 55-ї окремої бригади. Ви, як завжди, хлопці результативні. Дякую. Дякую бійцям ОСУВ Одеса, генерала Москальова, 63-я окрема механізована бригада, яка потужно б'є окупантів за удари по наших містах і селах на південному напрямку. Та ще відзначу сьогодні воїнів 126-ї окремої бригади сил ТРО аеророзвідників. Дякую вам, хлопці, за уважність яка стає влучністю нашої артилерії. Ворог обов'язково нестиме втрати у відповідь за кожен удар по українцях. Слава усім, хто зараз в бою заради України. Я дякую усім, хто працює заради нашої оборони і перемоги. Дякую усім, хто допомагає. Слава Україні!
Well, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and of course, Slava Ukraini. And that rounds out tonight's news segment on the 414th day of the war. Of course, I thank all of you so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure tonight covering the news with all of y'all. And of course, it's great to know that so many people find this channel to be a credible source of news and information on the war. If you did enjoy tonight's news and you are new to this channel, make sure to subscribe, as this channel runs the news every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. You can always count on us to have the news of the war in Ukraine. We never flake. We never quit. The only thing that has ever stopped this stream is, one, a pre-planned holiday, and we only have those for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And also, the only other thing that's ever stopped this stream from running is internet outages, and those have not happened lately, knock on wood. But of course, thank you all so much once again for watching the news tonight, and without further ado, we're going to be moving into our last bits of polls, and then on into our question segment, where we'll be addressing all of the super chats that have come in tonight, and then as many of the live chats as possible. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we have 4 polls to address, and the very first one says, Russia says they have almost sealed off Bakhmut and claims to prevent Ukrainian forces from leaving, and what are your thoughts? 71% said that is not true. The Russians are lying again. 9% said unsure. 18% said we don't yet have that information. And 3% said true. Russians now control the exits. Now, the Russians obviously make stuff up all the time. The only piece of evidence that might point toward that being true is the ISW has supposedly geolocated some footage which shows that the Russians might control a part of the main highway leading into Bakhmut from Chasiv Yar. But then again, you know, geolocation can sometimes be a little misleading. It could be one footage from the area that maybe they misidentified, so we really don't know yet. So I'm with the 18%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that's not true whatsoever, because we saw yesterday reinforcements going into the area. We actually checked on the Institute of the Study of War. They are a very credible source of information on this war and have largely mirrored what we say. You know, and of course, I don't really, in case if anyone doesn't know, I don't go out of my way to sit there and just copycat what other people say and just repeat what they say. I come up with my own ideas, and so if they align with mine, it's like, wow, that's neat. It looks like we're on the same page. And the Institute for the Study of War, from what we've seen going back in time and looking at things they said when I was saying them, they were largely saying similar things. On this one, however, I'm going to have to say that that's not really the case. We saw that Ukrainian reinforcements were being brought into the city as late as 24 hours ago. According to the Institute for the Study of War, the Russians have controlled the T-0504 MiG monument for the past 48 hours, which means that it would have been impossible for the Ukrainian reinforcements to have made it into the city if the Russians had already controlled it an entire days prior. So I would have to say that information appears to be on the Institute of the Study of War's end overstated, most likely, or maybe slightly misinformed. I'm not saying to go over there and start giving the ISW hell, because they've done a good job so far, and everyone makes mistakes. This channel has made reporting mistakes before, and I'm not one into acting like we're some kind of a perfect deity or something that can't do anything wrong. We've done plenty wrong, and they've done a few things wrong as well. So I'm not saying go over there and give them hell for that. It just seems as though it was misreported. As far as the Russians are going, it's a straight up lie. They've lied like this many times before, so that would not be shocking. So, you know, take it for what you will. The Russians said it. That's all you need to know. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says, France is allegedly blocking an EU decision to send military aid to Ukraine, and what are your thoughts? 39% said it's unlikely and just propaganda, 18% said unsure, 13% said the source is sketchy, and 31% said it's likely true, and France betrays us. And before I get to my opinion on this, I saw some folks saying that apparently a short while ago, some EU aid has passed going to Ukraine. I'm not sure if that's the one that was referenced in the article that we saw yesterday, which is what the poll's based on. So I'm going to say unsure and undecided because we really don't know yet. I haven't had the chance to check it out. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, could you please reread? What happened? Reread the line, you lying two-faced pony soldier.
Whoa, 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 whoa. France is allegedly blocking an EU decision to send military aid to Ukraine.
We actually spoke about that in brief in the question segment last night, and I haven't really been able to find any verifiable proof that they have been doing that rather than some loose claims. And of course, I have to say this. I'm not really happy with what Macron said, but one thing I certainly believe in, like I said about the guy who's getting arrested right now for allegedly spreading classified information, is that I believe that people are innocent until proven guilty, and we have not gotten enough information on what the French are doing at this moment in the EU to say whether they really are blocking Ukrainian aid or not. So I don't want to sit there and say something like that about the French that could be damning to them, to everyone who watches this channel, without any hardcore verifiable proof and evidence that they are doing that. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
Uh-oh.
Well,
A little bit of lag there. Can you still hear me?
yeah. And so with that, we are on to the next poll.
All right, and the next poll says Taiwan reports that some Chinese military assets have left the vicinity of the island. And what are your thoughts? 51%, excuse me, said China is finally ending exercises. 18% said unsure. 20% said it's only a minor pullback. And 11% said China isn't backing down. And right now, it appears to be only a minor pullback. It's a little too early to say whether or not it's a full withdrawal of all the Chinese forces that were there conducting the military exercise. And as we know, the current NATO exercises are still going on in the area as well, or at least the United States and I believe it was the Philippines too. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it seems as though the Chinese may be backing off for now. It appears that they were most likely trying to conduct those war games for diplomatic leverage, like we were saying originally. And it may be the case that things are starting to die down again, and they'll probably do something like this or something similar in an escalatory fashion in a few months' time or maybe a year's time. But it looks for now that a very bad situation in the East Asian area was averted, luckily. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And I think I've seen someone say, and I got to go back through the live chat because I saw something interesting here. Let's see, who's it? Roose Clinton said, no talk about the American politicians in Kyiv today. That's something that people give us strikes on because, you know, someone's favorite politician goes over to Ukraine and it's, you know, one party or another and they want us to talk about it. We've never actually said on this channel before anyone going over there. We didn't mention when the president went over there, the speaker went over there, any representatives or senators. We don't ever mention any of those. We did mention, however, the Secretary of Defense going over there because those are not publicly elected offices where people have like they are voted in on a political ideology. So we don't mention whenever American politicians visit. We'll mention when other leaders of other countries visit, but with America, you've got to understand that kind of stuff creates a firestorm in here, and we are always trying to avoid a firestorm because if I sit there and say something, you know, like so-and-so showed up from America, then everyone always wants to go and start immediately saying that we're on their side or something, and we're not, and we try and avoid that massively. Because one thing we do not want to do is we never want to get political, specifically American politics. American politics is a never-ending hellhole of torture and suffering for anyone who's unfortunate enough to get stuck in it on the YouTube world. Some people dive into it head on, and I think they realize the mistake of doing that. We never do, and on top of that, if we did, there is a good chance that we could sit there and start to split apart all of the pro-Ukrainians and start splitting them into smaller camps. And I think that is a very detrimental thing to do, considering people's lives are on the line over there. And as long as you're pro-Ukrainian, that's really all that matters. So that's why we haven't addressed that. And so with that, we are on to the next poll.
All right, and the next poll says Japan admits it lost track of the North Korean ICBM yesterday, and the evacuation on Hokkaido was a precaution. And what are your thoughts? 68% said not good. Japan can't track missiles, question mark. 10% said unsure. 12% said I'm mixed on this one. And 10% said it's fine. It was just a small error. And from what I can gather, it looks like the ICBM that was launched yesterday had multiple parts to it. At first, I thought there was multiple launches, but apparently it was the same ICBM that split apart into a couple of different pieces from what I gather. But that is certainly not good that Japan can't track that, because if you can't track it, you really can't defend against it. So apparently they just knew the general trajectory of the missile, and they figured it was going toward Hokkaido, and they told everyone to take shelter and hide. but it was just a precaution. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that there is. It's fairly interesting here. They did lose track of it. Now, that's an official statement from the Japanese government.
Yes.
That is very interesting here. I don't know how they would have lost track of it. It may have been that it was not as straight a flight path or a trajectory as we thought. But it is interesting here, though. While they say they lost track of the missile, they also were able to pick it up well enough that they were able to distinguish separate stages of the missile separating from each other.
Yeah, I mean, they can only figure out, I guess they tracked it from the very beginning, and then apparently when it split apart or it fractured or something, that's when they lost track and weren't sure where it was going.
Interesting. I don't really know what to make of that, to be honest, because it seems to be contradictory statements that they were able to keep such a good eye on this missile that they could actually tell that there were separate stages separating from each other, but at the same time they lost it. Because on the one end, it is unbelievable amounts of, I guess you could say, observation they're making of the missile, and on the other end, they don't even know where it went. So, you know, that honestly sounds to me to be two contradictory statements. Maybe I'm not hearing it. Maybe we're not hearing everything to where it would make sense that there's two contradictory statements. But still, with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and that's funny, Ender Slayer. But anyways, that was our last poll. So we're moving on to our super chat questions. And up first, we have a $175 donation from none other than Mark, General of the LSA, channel legend, and he simply says, "Evening, LSA."
And good evening to you. That is the most expensive evening I've ever seen. But still, good evening to you. And thank you so much, Mark, for helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, supporting us and helping us to keep this thing running. Now, Mark is a self-made general in the Lee Spring Army. But I think if anyone deserves to be a self-made general in the Lee Spring Army, it is Mark. Because Mark has, of course, slaughtered fundraisers almost single-handedly. And not only that, he's helped to support this channel immensely. And I've got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel, and good evening to you. I hope you've been enjoying tonight's stream, and of course, enjoying the stream that you are helping to keep running. Thank you so much once again, and I hope we addressed that fairly well. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $100 super chat from Psyops. And Psyops, thank you very much for that very generous support yourself as well. And he says, "I like how the orcs called the Ukrainians Nazi." Excuse me. "But all the orc bots that come in the channel are anti-Semitic. Really puts things into perspective on who the actual Nazis are. If in doubt, the Nazis are those ones committing genocide, atrocities, war crimes, so the orcs."
And I thank you for the support, Psyops. And I would say that it is very ironic, usually from the Russians. And they sit there and say, they say very Nazist ideas, like the Russians are the chosen people of the world, things like that. Everything's Russian. That's very Nazist of them to say. But what was very interesting today is that I had a free 10 minutes before the stream, and I saw this educational video that had been made in 1947 by the U.S. government, talking about it was like an anti-fascist educational film, and explained in 1947's terms what a Nazi was. And a Nazi is just a group, according to the 1947 film, that takes, I guess you could say, a large group of people. Like let's take America for example, that they used in the example in the clip, and they divided amongst, let's say, let me think. This could be a minefield ready to explode here, but this is just the example they gave in the film. They divided them up against the Catholics, they divided up some minorities, and then they started to try and pit the quote-unquote true Americans against these people. So that way they could quash these people who may have had some small amounts of power, like the Catholic Church has a small amount of power, so that way this one group can solidify theirs. And what's interesting about that is that that's exactly what the Russians do. That's exactly what they're doing in this war inside their own country. There are true Russians, true Russians, real Russians, and then there are other people. People who are not real Russians or true Russians, and that's also how they treat Ukrainians in occupied territory. They are Nazi by American definition in the late 40s. I mean, that is Nazi almost through and through. And it's crazy to see because you don't see that with the Ukrainians. You don't see anything similar to that where they sit there and go, there are these people who are outcast from our group. The only people they don't like are the Russians, and the reason why they don't like the Russians is because the Russians are killing them. But they don't sit there and go and try and divide up groups like, oh yeah, we no longer like the Chechens who live inside of Ukraine, or anything similar to that. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Psyops. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And what was very interesting, I have to say this, about that anti-Nazi propaganda clip from the 40s that was made by the US government, is that it said some things that honestly seem to reflect in the modern world on groups on every single side of people trying to pit each other, people against each other because of certain differences or being parts of certain groups. And if you look around, it's happening everywhere. And I was like, huh, that's fairly interesting. It looks like everyone's starting to pull out some rules from that playbook to try and use now. I mean, and that is everyone. That's not like trying to pick on one side or another. I've seen that everywhere. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support, Psyops. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and the next one goes to Hunter Stevens, who puts in a $20 donation and says, Enforcer, you changed my mind. I, like many, jump to conclusion, and many in the West forget what separates us from the authoritarians is due process, fair trials, and innocent until proven guilty.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that I was able to change your mind, because one thing that I believe in wholeheartedly are a lot of the rights that we have here in the United States that were put down in the amendments, put down in the Constitution itself for the citizens, so that way we would always have these rights. In the United States, there is such a thing as an inalienable right, and one of those inalienable rights, let me make sure, let me just pull up the Bill of Rights real quick, to make sure I get the right amendment and also read off the right thing. So let me go to the Bill of Rights, and let's see, I believe it is, let's see. I'm trying to figure out, let's see. I believe, Matthew, it is one of the amendments in the Bill of Rights that says that someone is innocent until proven guilty.
Yes, I believe so. I believe it's,
Because I'm looking at the 8th, because that's the one I thought, but I buzzed through it real quick, and I'm not seeing where it says that in here.
let's see, innocent until proven guilty. Where does that come from? Let's see here. What amendment is it? What amendment is it? Fifth Amendment.
The Fifth Amendment. Let's see. Article the 5th. No shall. Wait a minute, that's wrong. That is not the Fifth Amendment. That is the Third Amendment. What the hell? It says to the. Okay, hang on. We need to go somewhere else, because apparently the National Archives has the Bill of Rights laid out wrong. Let's go to the Bill of Rights Institute. And let's go to the. Let's see. Third Amendment. The Fifth Amendment. No person shall be held to answer for capital or otherwise infamous crime unless the presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be put twice in jeopardy of life or limb. Nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So in a nutshell of wordage, it is a constitutional right in this country that you must be given a trial and you must be treated as innocent until proven guilty. I believe heavily in exercising constitutional rights and not giving them away. Like, for example, with the Fourth Amendment, if a cop comes up to your house and says, "We think there's drugs in it, we want to search it," you shouldn't just have to go, "Okay, well, I mean, like, if you think, then, you know, you can just come in my house and search whenever." No, you have a right to refuse these people entry unless they have a warrant. You know, and if they don't have a warrant, they don't need to be coming in. And going off of the philosophy that a lot of people were using earlier, that this guy is just alleged to be the one who has released these classified documents, therefore he is guilty, that means the cops could use the exact same excuse and say, well, if you're not guilty, then there's nothing to hide and we're coming in your house and searching it. And if they find anything in there, then they can use it against you later. I'm very into using constitutional rights. It's a very important thing.
Also, one thing here, it's actually not written in the amendments. It's actually derived from previous laws, precedent, and subsequent court cases, and also the way the amendments are interpreted over time. So apparently, it's not actually like written out verbatim in the amendments.
Interesting, because I was reading this, and when I was reading this, I was like, it doesn't say that in there. It does say you have a right to due process and all that, and I guess that's kind of where the assumption of being innocent until proven guilty comes from. Because if you were assumed to be guilty, why even have a trial? You were just guilty. Might as well go to the sentencing. But that is interesting to hear. But still, I'm a very big believer in this kind of stuff because because without these rights, America is no better off than the Russians. America is no better off than the Chinese. We have no rights at all unless if we make sure as a society to hold up the rights of others even when it seems that it's futile. I mean, yeah, the evidence against this guy is right now it seems to be pretty compelling. You know, he was on the Discord server where the information was leaked. He's a part of the military. I mean, hell, you would sit there and think, yeah, the guy's guilty. But you can't think that stuff because sometimes that's not the case. This guy could be found, after all the evidence is shown in a court, to be not guilty. And we just don't know that. And it's not worth going out of our way to try and have a witch hunt on this guy and have him found for it. The last time there was a witch hunt, many of y'all may know it, it was the Salem witch trial. And some of y'all may have had to have read in school To Kill a Mockingbird. And what the hell was the name of that guy, Matthew, that was on trial in that book?
Let's see. Atticus Finch was one person in
he
there.
He was the attorney. But who was the guy he was defending? I forgot his name.
Well, let's see here. Let's see. Atticus Finch. Let's see. I'm not really sure off the bat.
I
I'll have
can't
to
remember
check,
the guy's name, but in that story, the guy was pretty much guilty until proven innocent, and that story is pretty much compulsory reading in most American schools to show you the troubles of having a system where if you enter it, you are guilty already, and there is no such thing as innocence. So I'm
Boo
very
Radley.
no, Boo Radley was the guy who was in that house, you know, the creepy dude that was like pale as snow and like shot the dude at the end of the story. I can't think of the guy, dang it.
Nobody else knows either. It doesn't look like. Some people are saying Inspector Gadget.
But that's one thing I believe in heavily. Even if you dislike someone, you have to stand up for their rights, because if you're not willing to stand up for yours, the next person who will have their rights stomped on will be you. And so you always got to stand up for rights that are protected under the Constitution, because the next person that's going to get it will be you. And so with that, thank you for the support, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. If y'all like my view, make sure to vote for me for president in 2040. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Zach G, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you, Zach, for the support. He says, thank you for all the work you guys do to bring us the news and the goings-on in Ukraine. It's so refreshing to be able to watch a fair, well-balanced, analytical look into the war without the annoying ads. And Slav Ukraine.
And thank you so much once again for the support and enjoying all the work we do. I put in a lot of effort into this. Me, at this point, pretty much put our heart and soul into this thing to keep it running, to make sure that y'all keep supporting Ukraine and that y'all keep paying attention. Because I think it's very important that we always keep almost continuous coverage around this war every single day to make sure that people know what's going on over in Ukraine and the brave struggles and tribulations that these people are going through. I think that's incredibly important. I thank you so much for enjoying that. And I also thank you for rereading that line, Matthew, because I need to hear the last part of it to make sure I can get it right.
He says, it's so refreshing to be able to watch a fair, well-balanced, analytical look into the war without the annoying ads.
And also, yes, about the ads, of course, that's a big thing I always harp on. We don't run a single ad on any of our streams. We don't have a sponsor on any one of our streams, and I find that to be the best thing ever. We are the only channel on YouTube who runs this way, from what I understand, where we have no memberships, we have no ads, we have no sponsors. We are completely ad-free, sponsor-free, and if people do enjoy this channel, they are the ones who decide our fate, whether we keep on running or if we don't. And y'all also allow us to not have to bend our will or bend what we say to be suitable to sponsors or ads. And funnily enough, even as we do not bend our will to sponsors, we still get emails from people who want to sponsor us. Like I think we just got one a day ago from someone else. So
We did.
yeah,
It's really good to see because it's kind of like when I watch videos with ads in the middle of it, especially when you'll talk about something serious, like for example the war in Ukraine or like World War breaking out, and then they break into like a sponsorship segment like Atlas VPN or something. It really throws me off every time.
yeah, and you know, and this is one thing that I always find to be a real dissertation in between people who find the war to be serious or not, is that while we always keep a very light and very excitable tone on this channel about the war, and some people have akined it to sports commentating, although I've never really heard a lot of sports commentating in my life, I consider it tasteless to sit there and show anyone getting blown away for that matter, and then sit there and go, this is sponsored by. I feel like that is just the lowest of the low of a thing to do, because it's pretty much commoditizing the war. It's like, hey, you know, like tonight's massacre was sponsored by Gillette. You know, it's like that seems really weird. And of course, Gillette doesn't sponsor, so I have to make that clear. That would be really weird to me, and I'm very glad that we're able to run this show, and thank each and every one of y'all that helps us to make this possible each and every night. And so thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel and supporting us so that way we can keep running it the way it's been running since the first day of the war. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and real quick, let me try to see what has happened here with the spreadsheet. Something's gone wrong, so Enforcer filibuster for just a moment.
And so Matthew's having a small problem with his spreadsheet here, and while he has a small problem, I'm going to take the moment to address one live chat. And Sharon Flynn, and oddly enough, that's a super chat question. I will answer it real quick, but we'll take another one. You can change the amount on a super chat by clicking, I think it's the little $ button at the bottom of the live chat, and then I think it has a little line where you can fill it in. I didn't know that the question was about that. Sorry about that. We're going to get on to another one. Brooks Precision said Tom Robbins.
I'm good.
Oh, okay. And so with that, dang it! Wait a minute. Well, I got to get to another one now because I didn't want to sit there and just answer. How can you support us? I want to make sure we answer a legit question. Brooks Precision said Tom Robinson is the guy falsely accused. I think the movie is Green. No. The Green Mile was the guy with John Coffey in it, the guy who didn't like the dark, who had like magical powers. Tom Robinson is the guy in the book To Kill a Mockingbird that was falsely accused of violating a woman, I believe, and it was found out that the woman lied on him, but he was still treated as guilty nonetheless, and then later on was killed when he tried to escape from prison. So with that,
That sounds like another case that's going on somewhere in the world.
Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? But with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Mark, General of the LSA once again, who puts in a $42 donation and says, I just want to see if you can get the exact same words as last time. Also notice that we hit 114,000 subscribers, and when YouTube became morons, stuck at that.
And I thank you for the support. I think we've actually passed, and we have 115,000 subscribers tonight. We're at 115,001. What the hell? That was the weirdest yeehaw I've ever heard. That they went. Dude, that sounded like one of those people in the movies when they're about to harass the woman in the alley, and then the Superman comes and beats them up. They're sitting there, where are you going, lady? Or something like that. But anyways,
my throat's like sore tonight for some reason. I can't quite do it right.
You need Ricola? I got like 1 million of them over here.
I might have to get some sometime.
Yeah, if you need to, while I'm answering this question, reread it again. You can scoot over here and get a Ricola. So reread it to me, then come over here and get yourself one.
Let me reread it. Mark says, I just want to see if you can get the exact same words as last time.
The exact same words as last time. I don't. What does that mean? What does it mean?
I'm not sure. I'm not really sure.
Sadly, I don't know what that means, Mark. Unfortunately. But maybe I'm getting the wordage right now. I don't really know, but still,
He said Batman.
Also, what?
He said Batman.
Batman. No, Batman. I guess, but also knows that when we hit 114,000 subscribers, and when YouTube became morons, stuck at that. We have been stuck at 114,000 subscribers. We finally crossed that threshold because YouTube just does not promote our channel as much as it used to. It used to promote us to the entire world, and it would be normal at the beginning of the war for us to get 1,000 subscribers in a day. Nowadays, we average about, I think it's like 50 subscribers a day, and sometimes a little less than that. It's kind of unfortunate, and that's why we always make a big note for people to hit the like button and also share this with their friends, because YouTube isn't really apt in sharing us with anyone else anymore. On top of that, from what we understand, we are also the largest Ukraine war live stream on YouTube. We actually were in the top 100 streams in terms of viewership for a little while. We were like number 91 or something like that. And so, as far as people who watch live streams in the Ukraine war goes, we've kind of maxed out all of the people who would be interested in that. So we don't really grow much anymore because we've pretty much capitalized on having everyone in the Ukraine war community that watches a live stream being here. We have not done that in the video world, though. The video world is a different category. But still, that's kind of why we may have leveled off at that point. But I would love to see this channel reach 250,000 subscribers. I think that would be amazing, because 100,000 was incredible. 250,000 would be unbelievable. And so with that.
And also, Mark said he just wanted to hear the whole without your support spill and everything again.
And of course, Mark, I thank you so much once again for the support. It helps this channel to keep on running. And without folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing ad-free and sponsor-free. Without us being able to keep it ad-free and sponsor-free, we, of course, would have to bend our will to say things that folks want us to say. And I don't think that's a good thing at all. I think that's terrible, and I think it is great to know that we can always say exactly what we want on this channel without having to worry about having sponsors drop off or having YouTube come and limit our ad revenue. I think that's great to know that we can always count on the Lee Spring Army to pull this channel through and make sure that we can always run this channel the way the Lee Spring Army wants. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Mark. I hope that was the word that you were looking for. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Marion Deemert, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you so much, Marion, for the support. And they say, Enforcer, when do you catch your breath when talking? It puzzles me, and you guys great.
Well, thank you for the support. And what's interesting is that I don't really take a lot of breaths while I talk, because throughout the course of my life, I've really just learned how to talk an incredibly long amount of time without taking a breath whatsoever. Or I take incredibly short ones that you probably can't hear, like the one I just did a second ago. But after I take that breath, I can talk almost continuously for maybe about another paragraph or so without having to take another one. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the question fairly well. And I don't really know what I sound like on stream. I don't really go back and re-watch my streams. So I wonder if it does sound like I never take breaths or not. And it just sounds almost like a machine talking that does not have to breathe. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Brooks Precision, who puts in a $20 donation, and sadly no comment to address. But Brooke, thank you very much for the support and keeping the channel running. And Enforcer, what say you?
I read off Brooks Precision his live chat, and it was like a video game side quest. I read it, so we got a $20 super chat, I'm assuming. But still, I thank you so much for the support, Brooks Precision, and I'm glad that you must have enjoyed our answer to your live chat fairly well, because, you know, back in the day, and I hate that it's not like this anymore. I'll actually see about showing you all this because it's very interesting to note. So let me go to our last live stream, and down here, and so I'll pull this over onto the second screen, and as you can see right here, that is the amount of live chat messages that we got on last night's stream. 991 of them. Almost 20,000 live chat messages in a single 3.5-hour stream just last night. And we get that normally. That is pretty much the normal amount of live chats that we get. And way back in the day, before this channel blew up, I would actually read off every single live chat because we only had like maybe 100 in a night. So I could get to them all, and I could give really quick answers, move on. But as the stream has grown, we've gotten up to the point that we get so many live chat messages a night, it's impossible to address or talk to each and every one of them, although it kind of saddens me that we can't, because so many of y'all are really cool and really fun to talk to, and the spammer here, who's probably helping to rack up the numbers that we're seeing on last night's stream, he just got banned, but I thank you so much, Brooks Precision, for supporting this channel, because I wish we could talk to more folks in the live chat like y'all. But sadly, there are so many live chat messages, we just can't. And let's see here. And everyone's talking about, yeah, let's see. I'm trying to read the live chat right now. Everyone's saying, man, we missed 20,000 by 9. Yeah, yeah, y'all did. I feel like y'all haven't on other ones, though. I'll go back, because I think sometimes we get up to like 23,000 live chat messages in a night. Actually, I'll go here real quick. I'll actually organize the streams by the highest amount of views, and then I'll see what the highest viewed live stream we ever had got in terms of, let's see. Wow, that's crazy. Okay, this is insane. This one actually got, and I'll pull this over here. This one was a Sunday fundraiser night. We got 250,000 views on this thing, and 51,000 views after the stream went out. And we also got 226 subscribers after it turned into a video. This was probably one of the most successful streams we ever had. And also look at the time it ran. It only ran for 2.5 hours. But only 11,154 live chat messages.
Dang. That's crazy. I read every single one of them every single night.
I mean, that's crazy. And we were getting only half. And look at that. That was our peak viewership on that stream's night. 16,000 people were on at the peak, and we had almost 10,000 on average at any given minute on the stream.
Dang, 16,000? That seems insane. Like, when was this again?
This was way back at the beginning of the war. This was like late March of last year. So it was all the craze to watch Ukraine stuff.
Jeez, man, we need 16,000 again.
It's so crazy to look at. It's crazy to think. And I think the stream alone got us, I think it was like 2,000 subscribers just off of one stream. But back in the day, I mean, like, hell, the Ukraine war was going on. People were watching everywhere. I mean, like, if you got into the Ukraine war news at that time, it was unbelievable. It was just absolutely insane. But it's crazy to think that just last night's stream, with something like 15 to 20% of the viewership of this stream, got twice as many live chat messages. It's like exponentially gone up throughout the war. But let me move this back over here. And with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Brooks Precision. And I hope that addresses why we can't get to every live chat, you know, because some people are always going, hey man, like, I've thrown in a question like for like a question every night for like 2 weeks. How come you've never answered it? That's because there's 20,000 of them. But still, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Laura Carr, who says, I have taken note that while on average a video is watched on the first day by 5 to 10% of subscribers, your first day views are around 50%. Slava Ukraine to all the loyal subscribers.
And thank you so much for the support, Laura. And also going into the, I guess you could say analytics, right now we're probably on track to have around 30% of the channel having watched this stream before this stream even rounds out. And then over the next day, it'll go up to about 50%. And in case if any of y'all don't know, the average number is somewhere around 10% for a normal YouTube channel for the viewer interactivity. So if you have like 100,000 subscribers, you should expect 10,000 views. And so the amount of viewer interactivity here in the Lee Spring Army and the Forcer channel is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, we are well up there in the algorithms as far as viewer interactivity goes, which I think is amazing. And it's cool to know that so many people who are a part of the Lee Spring Army are still so heavily involved in the war. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Laura. I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army to all of the loyal subscribers. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and the next one we have is a $20 super chat from none other than Dan Neisch. And he says, Budmo.
Budmo. I don't know what that means, but thank you so much for the support, Dan, and helping the channel to keep on running. And I love your profile picture. It's a Ukrainian trident. Really sick. And so with that, thank you once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Mark, General of the LSA once again. And he says, just to bug you.
Well, I thank you for the support. Doesn't bug me at all. And of course, Mark, I thank you for helping this channel to keep on running and helping us to keep those lights on. Because of course, without y'all, the lights wouldn't be on. We pay rent, just in case y'all don't know. Like, we live in our parents' house, yes, but we pay rent to be here, so it is not free. For some reason, some people think, actually, our haters think it's free to live here, and if it was, I would be very happy about that, but we pay rent. So, with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one we have is from Magic Sky Girl, who puts in a $50 donation and says, serious question, I want to know what you two do as a warm-up to the live stream, and we all want to know. Totoro, Totoro.
So here's what we do. One second, Matthew. Let me hop on my Discord. I'm going to throw you out of the call and then bring you back in. We're going to show exactly what we do.
All right.
All right, so I'll bring him in a call, and either he hops in call or I do. Totoro! Totoro! Oh, hello there! What you doing? And then Matthew would say something Matthew would say something like, "Oh, share the stream or the screen," and I'll go, "Yeah, sure." And then I go pull up this one here, and I go live, and then it shares the screen with him, and then we sit here and we talk about maybe a little bit of the news. I'll sit there and usually explain the title to Matthew, like tonight's title is this because this happened. So we're expecting that people will be looking forward to that or something like that. That's actually what we do, and our go-to phrase is Totoro. Like, I don't know what the hell started that, but we've been doing that ever since the beginning of the war when him and me actually started co-hosting. And also, another thing that we've started to do, and I won't do it because a lot of people don't like when we shout in the mic, but like during the anthem, like we're both like just shouting in the mic at each other, just the stupidest stuff we can. And then I tell them unmute and make sure not to say anything. And then I unmute it in about the last 20 seconds of the anthem. And then, we go into the news. But that's what we do. Just in case of anyone
Also, a lot of shouting of Igor and Barak.
Yeah, and then Matthew will say something like, "Man, these songs have been playing for 3 years. I'm so tired of them." And I'll be like, "Dude, it's our thing."
That Barak song is getting to me a little bit when we're playing it during the intro. It feels like my skin's crawling sometimes.
And Matthew tonight was sitting there. He's like, "Man, this thing's driving me crazy. It's like every day I realize there's a new instrument in that song." And I'm like, "Dude, it's like it's our song." But
it's true.
But anyways, that's what we do. And also, Joseph Sika was the one who picked up on that a long time ago, and he would usually go, "Totoro, Totoro," in his super chats. But still, that's what we do. That'll probably become a saying now, the Totoro thing. And also, George Roberta said the Ghibli thing. No, it's not Totoro, as in like the Totoro animal. I don't know where the hell this one came from because I didn't know of the Totoro animal until after we started doing that. And then Sika was like, "Oh, it's the Totoro thing from Studio Ghibli." And then we pulled it up and I was like, "No, it's not. I don't know where we got our Totoro from, but it is a different Totoro." So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support, Magic Sky Girl. And I hope that answered your question fairly well. And thank you so much once again, Magic Sky Girl, for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one, and Totoro!
All right, and with that said, we're moving on to our next one, which goes to Mark, General of the LSA once again, and he puts in a $20 donation and says, "Magic Sky Girl did it, and will be the VP."
And I thank you for the support, Mark. Magic Sky Girl did what, though? Is she guilty of a crime? Should she go to prison immediately? Go to jail, do not pass go? But still, all jokes aside, I thank you so much for the support. Magic Sky Girl will be the VP. She's on the ballot? What? That's still, I thank you for the support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much once again for being incredibly supportive of us and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $15 super chat from none other than Joseph M. Seacam. We just mentioned him a moment ago, and thank you very much for the support. He says, "If they seriously arrested the wrong guy on this, then I give up on our government. The reason why everybody's saying he's guilty is because we don't think the government would F this arrest up." What? And real quick, before you answer this one, Enforcer, I got to say, Joseph, that it would be quite tremendous if they messed this up. But you have to understand that the government is under a ton of pressure right now to find the leaker and find them fast because this is very embarrassing for the government. And if they didn't find the leaker in a quick amount of time, it makes them look really incompetent. So there's a possibility they might have messed it up, but we really don't know. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say not to lose faith in the system. He is a suspect right now. He's being arrested because he has some kind of a loose connection to the crime that's been committed. So that's why he's being arrested right now. If he's innocent, and they find that out quickly, he'll probably be released and he won't really be looked at any further. But no, it's kind of, well, yeah, I say that with a heavy emphasis on E. But, you know, sometimes the justice system, like right now, with a massive classified documents leak leading to a government embarrassment, they're trying to quickly speed their way into figuring out who is really at the bottom of this thing and then try and hold them, well, try and at least get them to court for it. And also another thing that Matthew and me have kind of found questionable, just being unfiltered with y'all, is that the kid is 21 years old, and it's very, very suspect that a 21-year-old kid in the Air National Guard would have some kind of level of classified clearance to be able to get a hold of those documents. What 21-year-olds do y'all know out there that has top secret clearance? I don't know of many. So
You know, one thing I was thinking earlier. One. Go ahead if you have a thought to finish.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, one thing I was about to say is, since he is in the Air National Guard, it's possible that maybe he was around maybe the commander's office. This is just a theory. And the commander is in the intelligence wing. So maybe he had some documents printed out, because these were printouts that the pictures were taken of. And he might have grabbed them, perhaps, and maybe taken them to another room. And after he folded them up and then unfolded them, took a picture of them, and then returned them back to the desk of the commander. That's a possibility. But that would be really incompetent for someone to leave those documents just lying around.
And I would agree with that as well. And another thing I saw while we were talking about this is that Lorraine's been around for a while, but in all caps, he is guilty. And also others help too. But we can't work off of that. I mean, yeah, you can think he's guilty. I mean, you know, no one could stop you from saying he's guilty, but on a governmental level, we can't support the idea of having like witch trials and mob hunts, pretty much, because think about this. Think about all the people who got screwed over during the Red Scare because of something similar like that, and imagine I can't say this enough. Imagine a world where the U.S. government, the federal government, can just come and arrest anyone on any charges, and the public assumes they're automatically guilty, and there's no accountability to make sure these people are truly guilty or not. People have died that way. The Salem witch trials is the best example. No one in that town was a witch, and yet I believe a dozen people got hanged, and then one guy got crushed by stones in that town. You know, like, we can't run a system off of an idea like that. And one thing I hate the most, and I'll say that every single president in modern history has done this, is that a trial will be happening instead of just sitting there and going, you know, they have all the evidence, they're the ones really taking care of it, I'm not going to make a comment on it, I'm going to let the courts make their decision. And then when the jury makes their decision, just back it up and just say, well, it is the jury after all, they did get all the evidence, and so their decision must be correct. We believe in the court system in America. Presidents nowadays will sit there and weigh in their personal opinions. He's guilty or he's not guilty. Or, you know, if the jury doesn't make a decision I like, I'll just pardon the guy. And then they just completely degrade the judicial system in its entirety, to the point of them trying to be pretty much a king and say, by royal decree, I find the guy guilty, and if the peasantry doesn't agree with me, I pardon them. It's like, that's not how this is supposed to work. And it's been working like that for, like, the past, 16 years. But anyways, that's my opinion on that. And I understand, Lorraine, that you think the guy's guilty, and you may be right, but I still say that on an official level, we can't sit there and condemn the guy yet. He's got to be viewed as an innocent man who's being alleged of committing this crime, and we have to try and prove that the guy's guilty. You know, or he may be innocent and walk free. So with that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Mark, General of the LSA, once again, and he puts in another $45 donation. And thanks so much, Mark, for being so generous. He says, by the way, I send you a bunch of support because this is the most cost-efficient way for me to rise 900,000 for Ukraine is to keep you guys functioning.
And thank you for the support, Mark. And I guess that is the most cost-efficient way to keep the stream running, to get up to $900,000 raised. I mean, we've gotten up to $900,752 raised in support of Ukraine. And it's really unbelievable to think that we've been able to do that. $900,725. It's unfathomable. It's unbelievable. And I can't really believe we've been able to do that. And so I got to thank you so much for finding the most cost-efficient way of supporting us to keep this thing running. Because, of course, without y'all, we would have never been able to spend the thousands of hours that we have running this channel at this point to be able to get to here. And so thank you so much once again for the support, Mark. And I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for the support. And also, I see that some people are saying that due process is a political thing. I don't know if anyone in the country really on an actual That's not even really a political thing. That's just a right that you have to due process. It's in the Fifth Amendment. You know, if that's a political thing, then politics is getting to a sad level. If we have to ask the question if someone is owed a proper trial or not, you know, I'll say that. Also, another thing I'll say, adding on to it, because I just see things that are like, what? You know, why? Why would people say that? You know, if any of y'all got alleged for a crime, you know, and I don't care if I like people or not, you are owed certain things. You are owed certain things as a right in this country. Like, it doesn't matter how damning the evidence is. You are owed to be treated like an innocent person until a jury finds you guilty. That's how this country works. And I wouldn't ever sit there and compromise on that, no matter if I agree with someone or disagree with someone or whatever they've done. If they have been arrested and charged with a crime, they are owed to be treated as an innocent person until their trial is had and a jury finds them to be guilty. That is the way this country works. I'll never compromise on that. That's what everyone's owed. That's what every single one of y'all that's an American citizen here right now are owed if you're ever arrested and charged with a crime. And I would never compromise on that. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a $15 donation and says, Russian talking like Rodney would be weird. Take a live chat question.
Oh man, блядь, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here, блядь. I went to the commissar the other day. I told him I needed a freaking pigeon, блядь. Oh man, I'm telling you, he gave me fish. Oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here, блядь.
But still, thank you so much for the support. That was my best Russian Rodney I could have ever done right there.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad. And with that, we are on to the live chat. What do we got for the live chat, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat goes to Rudy, who says, if the leaks about special forces from from the UK, USA, etc., are true, would that mean World War III is pretty much underway?
Can you reread that one again real quick?
If the leaks about the special forces from the UK, USA, etc. are true, would that mean that World War III is pretty much underway?
No, because the Russians wussed out on the whole special forces thing. They haven't even made a comment about those guys being there on an official level. So that shows they have no intent in following through with that, because if they mention that to the Russian public, there will be an expected follow-through that the citizenry would expect, and then they wouldn't do it. So they're not even going to mention it right now. And so I would say that World War III is not happening because of that. And so with that, I hope that does answer that live chat fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a $12 donation and says, you're the best stream I know. Other channels use humor, like some NAFO member channels I watch, so keep up what you're doing, and I've got no questions, please. So take a live chat question, and thanks.
And thank you for enjoying the stream a whole load. We try and use humor to lighten this up. Some people, I just don't get it, you know? Some people on YouTube think that because they cover a war, they must cry, or they must make every one of their viewers feel terrible. I don't think that's the case, because how in the world is me making people feel bad about the war? How is that actually going to help anything? That's not. It's really going to drive people away from the war. And that's why we're never into having a demure attitude, unless if it's something very serious, like war crimes or executions or something similar. Then we get a very serious tone. But we never get a serious tone outside of that. We always try and keep it very light and kind of jovial. Now, thank you so much for enjoying that. And we will also make sure to get a live chat as well. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
And this live chat goes to Seba, who says, why has there been so little movement in the lines for such a long period of time?
The reason why is because the Russians have almost run out of supplies entirely, and then they diverted all of their efforts and the few remaining supplies they had left into Bakhmut, and then the Ukrainians also did the same. And the Ukrainians have supplies, it's just that they also have a limited amount, and they're trying to play very conservatively and conserve ammunition and conserve resources and energy, and so they're not really doing a lot either. And when they do it in a small but almost a completely nuclear stint, like for example the Balaklia and Kherson offensives. Those two were really the only times we've ever seen the Ukrainians move forward, but they move forward by massive bounds, more than the Russians ever have ever since the beginning month of the war, over a given period of time. And so with that, I hope that does answer that question fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Yuri Bench, who says, let's see here. Oh, sadly, Yuri Bench, that one is very political and on a very, very hot topic. And I don't think we're going to be able to read that one off. But thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
Hot Topic. Isn't that a store in the mall?
Is it?
I think it is. I don't really know, but still, thank you for the support, Yuri Bench. I did see that one come in earlier, and I was thinking, ooh, I was like, that one we can't really answer. And I hope you understand, Yuri Bench. But still, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. But sadly, we can't answer that because that would break our no politics rule. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and the next one goes to Psyops yet again. He puts in a $10 donation and says, we shouldn't rush to judgment until he is proven guilty. I reserve my judgment. And the military has egg on its face. Scapegoats have been used in the past, and service members have volunteered to defend me.
And I thank you for the support. And could you reread the first part of that one, Matthew? Just like the first sentence or so.
He says, shouldn't rush to judgment until he's proven guilty, and he reserves his judgment.
And I agree with that. I had to make sure I heard that correctly. I agree with that completely. Everyone... And I can't speak for around the world because around the world things are done differently. And, you know, if that country has decided, like, for example, with Japan, you are guilty until proven innocent. Japan, actually. It's still like that on the books to this day. And I got to say, God bless anyone who gets arrested in Japan because I heard a Japanese attorney explain how it works. And if you're arrested over there, you may as well already be going to jail or prison. It's already happening for you. So... You know, I can't, and I'm not going to say that's wrong or right or anything. That's all about their cultures, customs, and traditions as to why their judicial system's laid out that way. But for Americans, here in America, you are always owed due process, and you're always supposed to be treated innocent until proven guilty. And, you know, and of course, you know, it's so easy to say something like the guy's guilty. I mean, you know, it looks like he is. But at the same time, if I'm going to sit there and say that I want to become the president of this nation in 2040, who would I be? What kind of president would I be to sit there and just start waiving people's rights and say that they have no rights and they're already guilty? No rights at all under the Constitution. No Fifth Amendment rights. They're not innocent until proven guilty. They're guilty already. They don't even need a trial. Just send them straight to prison or have them executed. That would be what the Russians are doing right now. And look how badly we view them. We view them terribly. And so I definitely agree with you. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Chip Kerwan, who says 60 years ago this week, MLK spent 10 days in the Birmingham City Jail for marching without a permit. And I'll tell you what, marching without a permit, that's a serious crime right there, boy.
You know, I got to say this. It always seems so weird to me that you have to apply for a permit to protest or demonstrate, because I believe it's in the First Amendment, you were allowed the right to assemble. But then it seems as though, you know, it seems there's a little bit of a caveat there, because if you are given a permit to assemble and you can actually be denied a permit, which has happened on some instances in American history, you know, it's kind of like a conditional right.
Well, yeah, they give you all the rights, but every single right has restrictions on it. So, you know, guns, there's restrictions on that. Free speech, there's restrictions on that. You can't.
Well, we can't go too much farther down that route, because it will start to become really political. Because, you know,
that's just facts.
Well, it is facts.
You can't yell fire in a crowded building. That's a crime.
That's true.
And you know, some would consider that free speech.
And you also can't strike in a factory during wartime either, which is also a blatant violation of First Amendment rights. But, you know, I guess it is what it is. But still, thank you for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. Let's see. A permit on a right is unconditional. I don't know what you mean by that, Casey Johnson. Unfortunately, I think the wordage on that one's going over my head. But still, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Psyops, who puts in a $10 donation and says, care to explain how you know what, oh man.
Oh, no.
No, can't read that one. But thank you, Psyops, so much for the support. I did get a laugh out of that one on my own. Sadly, nobody else can, because I can't read it off. But thank you very much for the support. And speaking of Psyops, we have another one from him. It's another $10 donation. He says, get pure juice at enforcerstore.com, and the latest news at twitter.com/it's the enforcer.
And I thank you so much for the support in helping this channel to keep on running. And also, I got to thank you for supporting the juice. It is pure juice. You know, Matthew, we need to create a beverage line just called Pure Juice. Like it is literally just juice, and just call it Pure Juice.
That sounds like we might end up in prison for that.
No, no, we wouldn't. It would just be very expensive. We'd go in debt and probably go bankrupt. But so, thank you for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and the next one goes to Trister1. He puts in a $20 donation and says, Enforcer, which U.S. president would you most identify with?
Teddy Roosevelt, without a doubt. I really respected what Teddy Roosevelt did. Of course, our no politics rule only extends from the 1960 onwards. So anything happening from 1960 up till the present day, that's too modern. So then it almost directly applies to modern politics. But going back 100 years or so, it doesn't. So Teddy Roosevelt is my favorite president. I think he did great things. He founded the National Park Service, and you know that's kind of like one of those superficial things. Like, oh, great. But really think about it. There could be. Like, there could just be straight up suburban areas in the middle of Yellowstone National Park right now if it wasn't for the National Park Service. And I've got to give a huge amount of respect to the kind of foresight that the national parks had, you know, in their foundation. These kinds of areas of natural beauty were protected for the rest of all time. And I think that was a great thing of oversight. I also like how Teddy Roosevelt started to bring the United States out into the world stage a little bit more. And so instead of the United States kind of being, you know, kind of just sitting there and floating around in the wind, you know, having to go with the ebbs and flows of the world economy, we got out there and we actually started to do things. Like the United States brokered the peace in between the Russians and the Japanese during the Russo-Japanese War, or the, I believe it was the Sino-Japanese War. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was the Russo-Japanese War of 1905. But I really liked a lot of the things he did. I also liked the Food and Drug Act, well, the Food and Drug Administration that was created under, I believe, the Food and Drug Act, which also started to regulate the kinds of foods that, you know, could be sold to the public. I thought that was a really good thing because in case y'all didn't know, back in the day, food, well, more so canned food and mass-produced food in the United States during that time was like the Wild West. Like you could literally eat peas that were made to look a little bit greener with some arsenic on them. You know, it was a very questionable time. And there was a group of people during that part of history called the Suicide Squad. They were literally called that ate all of these foods and ate nothing but these foods for an entire 2 months, and then they observed the medical well, I guess you could say the medical effects that it had on these people, and some of them were starting to suffer from kidney failure just from 2 months of eating things like canned foods that were being produced at these factories. And that's why Teddy Roosevelt brought around the FDA. And I think those kinds of things are great. I think that was a very important thing for the country to do, and he was really focused on improving things here in the country and also making sure that we were represented around the globe. So I think he was a great president for all those things considered. And I also love the Great White Fleet. I thought that was a really cool thing that we did as well. But with that,
you know, one president that was really effective back in the day was Eisenhower, because he created the interstate system. And imagine if, like, back in the day, the interstate system was pretty revolutionary. Like, that was a big deal. Today, it's like, you know, people talk about the Hyperloop and all these like different train systems. If we had Eisenhower today, we would probably actually have that underway. But, you know, we don't have Eisenhower.
Also another thing I have to say about that, man, I kind of have to disagree with you because Eisenhower screwed Eisenhower screwed over the railways. And this country was built on railways. You can't even ride a train anymore in this country unless you want to be in the worst conditions possible. I mean, this country was working fine on trains. I don't know why in the world. I mean, the interstate was great and all. I'm not dissing on the interstate, but I mean, you know, the railroads were fine. I mean, they were well developed. I mean, back in the day, it wasn't that uncommon to hear of a train in America going over 100 miles per hour on a normal passenger route. Nowadays, a train can't even break 30 without derailing and spilling toxic chemicals in East Palestine, Ohio. You know, it was.
But was it a choice between choosing the interstate system or the trains, or could they have had both? Because it sounds like it might have been a choice between the two.
Yeah, it was a choice because they had to figure out where the subsidies would go. And so Eisenhower stripped all the subsidies from all of the railroads that were running passenger services and just threw all of those subsidies into the interstate projects, and so killed the railroads, and then the interstate came to be. And I
have to say that sounds like, you know, it's a shame the railroads got kind of screwed over, but it was probably a good call because the interstate system was definitely needed.
But I feel like this is honestly a really good debate, because was it really? Because once the interstate system came to be, cities no longer had any concept of density here in the country. Now we have these amalgamation cities that are like 30 miles wide in every direction that takes like 2 hours to drive across, when a normal city before the interstates came around and before I guess you could say car culture was really taken off because of that, you could actually get from one end of the city to the other in a practical amount of time, like maybe 30 minutes or so, by like a taxi or by a little commuter train or something. You can't do that anymore.
That's true. That's one negative side effect of it. But also, look at the interstates in two different ways. It was made primarily for defense, so you can move equipment, military equipment around the country really fast. And also, it's really good for the civilians too. So it benefits the federal government and also the average person as well. The trains could technically do that, but I would argue that the interstate's better because you can transport multiple things at the same time, and you don't have to worry about, one train getting loaded up at one time. You can have trucks going all over the place, putting stuff everywhere.
But but anyways, and also JC the Music Man said, bring your own rules. This is a pre-1960s topic here, my man. So this actually falls out of the rules. This would have been probably a debate you heard the railroads making in the 1950s, but still, sadly, we're going to have to move on because I think we're getting down a good rabbit hole, but I would love to go into this debate because this is actually a really interesting one. There's no right answer here. It's just a matter of opinion. And honestly, Matthew, that might be... no, we're not going to make a poll on that, but still, that is a really good discussion. I wish we could have that one, but sadly, we got to get on to the other questions. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question as to who I found to be my favorite president. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again for helping this stream to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $50 super chat from Arnie YDT. And thank you so much, Arnie, for the very generous support. And Arnie says, did you see the info that FBI tracked leak through Discord and social media with a pic of him taking a pic of the docs on his kitchen counter and then compared it to a pic on his social media showing the same counter? And it's on Denny's stream.
And I thank you for the support, Arnie. And I have not seen... the kitchen counter. I've seen some people say that throughout the stream, but I have never seen the actual picture showing the kitchen counter. So sadly, I can't really confirm that. And I would pull up Dennis' stream, but one thing that is that's kind of forgotten because one person does this a little too much, showing my stream on their channel, is that showing someone else's video on YouTube and them talking and saying stuff in it for a certain amount of time could be a violation of copyright. Oh, it usually is a violation of copyright, and they could actually get copyright strike for that stuff. So sadly, I can't really show Dennis' video on stream, but I would if I could. So sadly, I can't look at that right here, right now, but I will try and look at that. It probably won't be tomorrow. I have a really busy day tomorrow. I have to write several essays over the course of the next day and also go do another thing. So it probably won't be tomorrow, but it will be within the next few days. And so thank you so much once again for the support, Arnie Yunt. I hope that does at least address that I will be looking into it. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, being an old guard.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Mace. And Mace, thank you very much for that support. And sadly, no comment to address, but we do appreciate you very much, Mace. And Enforcer, what say you?
Oh my God, dude, it was almost a 50-50 split there for a second, and now it's blown up in the way of the interstate. We'll have to let that poll run. That was actually crazy for a second. I was like, oh my God, it's a perfect 50-50 split, and then it didn't. So reread that one again for me real quick.
There's nothing to reread. It's just from Mace. It's a $10 super chat.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Mace. Of course, one of our true OGs. I got to thank you so much, Mace, for sticking through it with us through 2 mod schisms. Mace was actually well, he was on the first Discord server when the first mod schism happened, and then he was on the second server as a mod when that schism happened as well. And I got to thank you so much for backing us up through both of those. Also, I would also on this one I saw someone say, I'm not answering that question. This one is this one's going through a bit of a channel loophole on this one because this is a pre-1950s topic because the interstate program was started in the 1950s and we have a no politics rule of things going into 1960 and onwards. So this actually does fall through a loophole. We can actually talk about this without really ruffling anyone's feathers in the modern day because the interstates are here. Like it or not, they're here to stay. So it's more of like a hypothetical question of should we have made that decision 60, 70 years ago. But still, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again, Mace, for being a true OG. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to John, LSA North Zedrin, who puts in a $10 donation, excuse me, and he says, is Anheuser-Busch sending cans to Ukraine?
I think I heard about that at some point. I haven't really been able to confirm that, but as far as I know, I think they are, which is kind of cool. That Ukrainian soldiers can get sauced on a beer from America. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Richard Philpott, who puts in a $10 donation and says, let's see, arrested in Massachusetts, 23 counts of assault to commit murder, released without bail, found guilty in Massachusetts, Supreme Court. It was a self-defense case. No one was hurt, just scared them.
And I thank you for the support. Sadly, I'm not really tracking that for some reason. Can you explain it to me real quick, Matthew?
Let's see here. I'm not really sure here what this is in reference to, Richard, but if you'll let us know, I have a feeling there was more to the super chat, but I'm not sure exactly what it's referencing, so I'm back to you, Enforcer.
Sadly, I don't know what it's referencing either, so unfortunately, I don't know how to comment on that one, but I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. But before we move on to the next one, I would actually like for Matthew to address the poll, because it is actually very heavy in one direction.
Okay, so the question on the poll is, what would you have chosen if you were Eisenhower? 76% said build those interstates, and 24% said keep subsidizing the railroads. And I would agree with y'all, obviously, to 75%. I think building the interstates was a really good choice. And we had to do that because I believe Germany, did they do it before us or at the same time?
Germany did it during Hitler's reign, and they built the Autobahn system.
Yeah, see, the only part we messed up on the interstates is we didn't allow an unlimited speed. That's the only part we messed up on. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I have to stick to my guns. I see that subsidizing railroads is getting a little bit of traction, but not enough to catch up at all. I would still have to keep with subsidizing railroads because the interstates had consequences that affect this country to this day. Suburban sprawl became a thing. I'm not a big fan of driving 2 hours to get from one part of the city to the other. I'm not a big fan of that. I wish cities were a little bit more dense. Another thing I'm not a big fan of is that small towns died. Every single one of them did. If it wasn't on an interstate, it's dead. There was no coming back from that. Everyone had to either sit there and not be a part of any economic activity in this country anymore if you were in a smaller town, or they had to move to a big one. I didn't like that much either because, you know, you can drive through all these towns and all of these people, you know, if you ever talk to anyone who's like 70 and 80, they'll sit there and go, oh yeah, when I was a kid, this town was great. And then the interstate was built just 11 miles away and this thing died. No one came here anymore. And every single business here dried up. Like, you know, that was a bad side effect of the interstate. The railroads kept everything in a fine balance. Every single town had a railroad. And, you know, and yes, the interstate was built under the guise of it being used for defense. But even now, in the modern world, does anyone ever see a lot of military vehicles being transported on the interstate? No, they get loaded up onto a train and transported across the country. This is the most cost-efficient way to move a mass bulk of equipment at any given time in history. The railroad's always been the most efficient way to do that over land. So it didn't really do anything defensively. It really was more so for economic stimulus and moving into that direction. It also had to do with Eisenhower had a lot of lobbyists that were a part of the car industry, and subsidizing interstate development would, of course, help to sell more cars because the interstate was cool like that, you know, and everyone who was cool had a car now. But I think the railroads were great. I really hate that the railroad went away. This country was known. This country was the railroad country. We built more miles of railroad track than anyone else in the world. We had this thing down to a science. We were killing everyone. The best railroad trains, the best expresses, anything you could imagine. You could ride like luxury on a budget on a train here in the United States, and you can get from one town to the other in quicker time than you could on the interstate. And then sadly, it's just that the subsidies were switched from the railroads to the interstate, and all of that kind of just faded away. No one in America even really knows what a train is anymore, and it all just happened over the past few decades. I feel like we honestly missed out. But still, that's just my opinion.
I do agree with you on one thing. It is unfortunate that the small towns dried up because of the interstate. But then again, if the interstates weren't implemented, we probably wouldn't have grown at the pace we have grown as a country because, for example, a lot more people started driving cars. So you needed somewhere to let them drive the car. The interstate facilitated that for the most part. If it was still just country roads and stuff like that, we'd probably have congestion gone wild because everyone loves cars in the U.S.
That's true. I wish we could find. But who's to say? Oh, well, this thing could go on forever. It's a great discussion, though. I wish we could do it. But with that, I hope we address that poll fairly well. Still, everyone wanted to subsidize the interstates, and that's what happened at the end of the day in the 1950s. Is that the interstates were subsidized, railroads would die off by the mid 1960s, mid 1970s, and we have the interstates now. Can't really complain because that's the way we live in America, and that's how it is. But it is what it is. So with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to that one guy, 909, who puts in a $10 donation and says, "It seems to me that this leak is more of an effort to discredit the part of the media that is questioning the government's role in this conflict, and the suspect is just convenient for the narrative."
It could be that the suspect is convenient for the narrative. That may be the case, and that's why I'm always into the idea of treating someone as being innocent until proven guilty, because we don't really know the situation behind the guy's arrest or what they're really going to try and charge him with, or if they even have any suitable evidence, really hardcore evidence on the guy. We got to wait for that to go to trial and see what the jury's decision is, being presented with all the evidence. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Cliff H, who puts in a $10 donation and says, "Juice also means influence or power, such as step off or I'll get you bounced." Damn, I have juice in this casino like you wouldn't believe.
Man, that step off or you get bounced. Dang. Oh my god. But still, I think you for the support, and it seems as though we've gotten some support to keeping Juice around. So I guess it is straight up juice to say juice. And I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and the next one goes to, let's see here, it goes to Critical Mass. While I have a little bit of a voice crack there, who puts in a $10 donation and says, "Can I be a Grand Marshal of the Amerifatti LSA Brigade? Hi, old Mr. Lunchtime, and please take a comment from the chat. You can donate to the Save the Mount Foundation for less than a cup of coffee a day."
And I think
yes, please do.
I thank you for the support, Critical Mass, but I don't think we're going to be having any hiling around in the Leaf Spring Army anytime soon. That ain't no good look. But you can be the Grand Marshal of the Marifati LSA Brigade. You can be that. So with that, thank you so much for the support. We also get a comment from the live chat as well. Thank you for helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and the comment from the live chat goes to, let's see here, Paul Benz, who says, "Enforcer from the southern border of Moldova to the Black Sea is an area of Ukraine that looks like it might just belong to anybody. What is the brief history of that area?"
The brief history of that area, and he's talking, I guess, from the area around Odessa to Crimea.
From the southern border of Moldova to the Black Sea.
To the Black Sea. So I'm guessing this area right here. This actually has been owned by, I guess you could say, Slavic countries for a good bit. Well, I kind of say that with a little bit of a stretch, because the Romanians actually, I believe, did control all the way up to around this area, around Zakota, for a good while in their history. But it's been owned by practically everyone. I believe at one point it was owned by the Ottomans. It was owned by the Greeks first. That's where Odessa got its name. And then the Greeks collapsed, and then I believe the Romans controlled it for maybe a small amount of while, or remained an independent Greek city-state. Then that collapsed, and then the Scythians came through. The Scythians controlled it. Then the Scythians collapsed. Then the Kievan Rus came to be, and then they started controlling the area, and then they got swatted by the Mongols. And then the Mongols kind of stayed in the area until they created the Rus, just the Rus. The Duchy of Muscovy, and then the Golden Horde, which remained here in the south. But this area at that point, I think it was still controlled by just really anyone. Then the Crimean Khanate came to be, and it existed for a little while, and then after all that, Zaporozhian Cossacks came to control the area, and then everyone got stomped by the Russian Empire in the 1750s, and then they controlled the area and subjugated the Ukrainians, much like everyone else had pretty much throughout history, until the I guess you could say the Russian Revolution. Then the Ukrainians made their own independent state. They actually ended up controlling a lot of this area until about 1921, and then the Russians once again conquered the Ukrainians, and then they became a Soviet republic. So with that, I hope that gives a brief rundown of everyone who's controlled that area. And if it is inaccurate, let me know, because I think I may have missed a couple of people who own parts of that area for some time. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again for support, and I hope that answers the question fairly well.
All right, and the next one we have is from Richard Agur, who puts in a $7 donation and says, it's great to see you guys emphasizing appropriate application of the presumption of innocence. It's very important.
And I thank you for the support, and I do find that to be very important. And I think that if someone wanted to become president of the United States, it's very important for that person to respect and heavily emphasize the rights that citizens have, and to not stomp on them. A lot of people always stomp on ones selectively, the ones they like and the ones they dislike. I think that a president should protect all of them, because every single American is owed the same rights, and you can't sit there and go, because someone may have gone and done something like this, and just go, you know what, let's waive the rights, let's just go hang the guy. You can't do that. It's just not right. It's not constitutional, and it's wrong. But still, thank you for the support, and thank you for agreeing with me on that. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and the next one goes to T77, who puts in a $5 donation and says, but what a stupid crime. Always stay clear of federal laws containing words like treason.
Oh, yes, I would definitely agree with that. I would make sure to stay clear of treason. Treason, I think, is really, regardless of anyone's stance, I think is one of the few crimes that should have the punishment of death attached to it. Because treason can end up getting an entire nation screwed over. It can get the entire country screwed over. It's a very serious offense to commit treason against the country. And so, I would say that if the guy is found guilty, and I'm not really sure what the stance is right now on the death penalty on the federal level, but if the guy is found guilty of treason and disseminating those documents for that reason, I would actually advocate for the guy to get the death penalty, because treason is a very serious offense, and I think that we should treat it as serious as it should be. But that's just my opinion. Of course, the guy's not guilty yet. He's still innocent at the moment, and we have to see if they can prove that he's guilty or not. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one says, let me get to it real quick. It's from Joe Little, who puts in a $5 donation and says, Discord is where the haters go to hate.
Discord is where the haters go to hate. Discord had great people on it. We had thousands of great people on Discord, and I don't mean to disparage any of them, but the people who try and become moderators on Discords, some of them are just the worst people ever. There are, of course, real ones out there, like Mace. Mace is a real one. But some of them were just terrible. I mean, like the one, that I don't know if you've taken care of that one, Matthew, but the one that sat there and tried to come up with a whole fake story about how we were encouraging people to sexually harass them on the Discord server after they got their
I still need to take care of that one, actually.
Yeah, that one. And then went around telling people that story. That was completely wrong. People would go on there to make trouble, pretty much. And then we found out that apparently other people, well, really just one specific person that we know of, apparently stuck their moderators from their Discord channel into ours and had them infiltrate our mod teams to try and create more problems and more trouble. We figured that out from a viewer that actually saw that they had been in that server for longer than they had been in ours as a moderator, and I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And of course, that's the channel that outright sits there and calls us out in name and violates YouTube's harassment policy every single time they do it. So yeah, that was a very interesting thing to hear, and I was like, yeah, it seems as though Discord is nothing but trouble. And it's very interesting, Matthew, having those dots put together. And when the guy specifically went out of his way to say this, he can't even hold a community together. It's like, yeah, if you're sending over your goons to try and rip it apart, obviously it probably won't last. But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for support. But one thing I'd say is that Discord should not be held accountable for what this guy did. That was an individual operating entirely on their own, and if they didn't have Discord, hell, who's to say he wouldn't have gone to Facebook and made a group there? You know, I don't feel like the company where that happened in should be held accountable. I feel like it's more so on the individual to be held accountable for the crimes he committed instead of trying to hold an entire company accountable for something they didn't actually do. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to, let's see here. It goes to Diane Childers or Childers. I'm not really sure how to say it. But Diane, thank you very much for the $5 support. And also, big thanks to Certify as well, who puts in a $5 donation. No comment on either one of them, but Diane and Certify, thank you so much for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you really do help this thing to keep on turning in the background. Y'all oil the gears that are able to keep this stream running, and I thank y'all so much once again for helping us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and also, by the way, I have to admit, me and Activista are having a bit of a legal debate in the chat here, so I'm gonna get back to focusing on the chat questions. But very interesting debate we're having here, and I'm doing some research on it on the background because I'm very intrigued by certain legal debates. Unfortunately, get this. I was told by Activista that it was held in some case, I can't remember the exact one, that apparently yelling fire in a crowded building when there is no fire is protected speech. And I was looking, and it appears there is some truth to that, but I haven't done enough looking yet to figure out if there's an exception. It appears there might be an exception. If it leads to immediate lawless action, that might be an exception to it, but I need to do some more looking, but it's very intriguing.
Well, I have to ask this then. Does that cover saying bomb when you're like at the ATF's like checkpoint? Because they're always in there, oh, don't say that word. It's like, what? It's like you know, like a bomb just materializes if you say the word. Like, I'm like, I don't get like the whole point of that. I would like to know the answer to that question. That's one I'm interested in.
Yeah, I mean, in Alabama, if you yell fire in a crowded building, you're most likely, if you cause a riot and people get injured, you're going to get charged with inciting a riot. I can almost guarantee you that.
Interesting. And I see a lot of people actually getting into that in the live chat saying it's not protected speech. It is. It may differ from state to state based on the case law there. I'm not really sure. But still, with that, we are on to the next one. Very interesting discussion, though, that you're having.
Very interesting. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Joseph M. Sika, who says, and if he didn't do it, he knows someone that does. They didn't just arrest this guy for no reason.
And, well, you know, I mean, like, sometimes they kind of do. One time, y'all may remember a story where the U.S. government had a van drive by, someone walking down the street, picked him up, and then they flew him to Guantanamo Bay and tortured him for 2 months, and then they realized he's the wrong guy, and then they let him go. Sometimes that stuff does happen. And I think that's certainly an oversight on the federal government's end. So, you know, I always want to hold back judgment. You know, one thing I have to say is that everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and there's no reason to think that this guy is already guilty just because the federal government went and had him arrested. So I always want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. No matter how damning the evidence is, everyone must be given the benefit of the doubt. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, but an interesting point. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Trister1, who puts in a $5 donation and says, here's to you too.
And here's to you too. And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a $5 donation and says, have you been invited to channel to talk to a guy called Gonzal or something? Don't waste your time.
I don't think we have, but we got invited to some guy called Narwhal or something like that on Twitter, and that was just a waste of time. A literal waste of 5 hours of my time. And then the guy is such a Chad Sigma Alpha or whatever that when I sit there and tell him after the show, dude, I'm disappointed you wasted my time like that. Why the hell would you ask me on your show? He sits there and doesn't even respond. It's like, wow, what a Chad Alpha Sigma, you know.
Mario Narwhal.
Yeah, Mario Narwhal or something like that. You know, one of the crypto people, or something like that. And man, they had some dumb people on. I mean, It's like, God, it's like no one has even done any research here. Like, they sit there, 6 ships from Israel with radars that can literally look over the entirety of Lebanon could not conduct a successful blockade of Lebanon. It's like, what are you, idiots? It's like, yeah, they can. It's like, shit. Like, they sit there, and if they're not near a ship, they go, stop, don't go to the port. And they go, screw you, man. And then they fire an anti-ship missile at it, and they hit it and sink it. It's like, that is an effective blockade. No one's going to test that blockade. That was one thing that came up there. And then some other guy said that Taiwan broke away from the People's Republic of China at some point recently. It's like, no, it didn't. That's just a straight up lie, too. Like, there was so much crap that was said on that show that was just pure wrong. And it really is, it's sad to think that they get like 300,000 views each Twitter talk space they do, and all of this fake, non-supported crap is just being said, and none of it's even true. You got like communist Chinese shills on there. You've got other people from other sides that don't even know what the hell they're talking about. I mean, it was a room full of uneducated people, and they were sitting there talking to 300,000 people like they knew something, and I was like, this was just shocking to me. But yeah, we wasted our time on that, and after that, after wasting our time being asked to come on shows, one guy asked us, and I actually had a really good respect for this guy because I used to watch him years ago when I didn't even have a YouTube channel. He asked us to come on his podcast or something like that 3 separate times, came up with like excuses 3 separate times as to why we weren't going to be coming on the podcast, and then never reached out to us again. And after so many times of getting burned with being guests on other shows, and sometimes seeming as though we get burned bringing guests on our show, on a few of them, it's like, hell, we've largely given up on being with anything involving the word guest in it. We've pretty much given up on that stuff, but still, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, who puts in a $5 donation and says, type Russian news in YouTube, then filter by channel. You'll find the channel called Russian News, which has press conferences from Russian officials.
Interesting. Let me see if I can pull that one up, because considering it's Russian, probably would be fine. So it's called Russian News? That's just the channel?
Yes.
Let's see here. Russian News. It has 67.5 thousand subscribers. Let's see what they're doing over here. I know they're telling the truth over here. They have a title. I'm not going to show their channel because I'm not giving them a on-stream plug, but one of their titles for one of their videos is Russia has plans for a lunar space program. That was 14 hours ago. BS. I'm calling BS on that because they can't even get a proper tank right now. But still, thank you for supporting, sharing that with us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Richard Philpott, who says, I meant to say I was found not guilty in reference to the not guilty until proven innocent topic. And he was talking about that earlier super chat about, let's see, let me go find it real quick. Richard Philpott. He said the individual that was arrested in Massachusetts, 23 counts of assault to commit murder, released without bail, and found not guilty in Massachusetts. And he was trying to make the point that even though somebody can be accused of such serious crimes, sometimes they are innocent and they do get off on the charges.
And I would have to agree with that. That's why I always say people have to be treated innocent until proven guilty. It's a very important part of being an American, really. I mean, like, it's a part of what we are as a country. Like there really is no other country out there that guarantees that kind of right. In some countries, that right could just be suspended, not even in times of emergency, just at certain times, whenever the government really decides. We're one of the few countries that kind of does not have that as an exception. And I know some people are going to be going, no, man, that's not true. Oh, yeah, well, you wait until you see something serious happen in your country and see what your government does. Watch and see. Sometimes that right is not protected in some countries where you think it would be. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Richard Philpott again. And he puts in a $5 super chat and says, I got to learn to proofread. And no problem. Don't beat yourself up over it, Richard.
And no problem. I can't even speak sometimes, so don't worry about it. It's no big deal. So with that, thank you for the support. I hope we addressed that fairly well, and we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to the entire family, who's back again.
Hey,
Village, Bill, Carl, Bob, Danny, and Frank, who puts in a $5 donation and says, about this guy slash suspect being guilty or not. Are you sure that this arrest was all normal-like, and you know that it wasn't all evil and grainy and
One out of 3. So we gotta wait for the other 2. So we'll wait.
Here's the other one. $5 super chat again from the whole family, who says, and you know that it wasn't all evil and grainy and black and white, and somehow it all took place in a fierce thunderstorm with more lightning strikes going off per second than in any other ...
2 out of 3. So we gotta wait for the third one. Though I have to say, this is very typical whole family stuff. To have like the 4-part super chat, it's still it is a hallmark of the whole family. And I gotta say, I'm looking forward to the third one so that way we can answer the question. So we're waiting. We're waiting.
Indeed. We are waiting. We are.
Let's see.
All right.
We're waiting.
Oh, silence.
We're waiting. We're standing by. Stand by. It's the
Oh, Ted B said, I do not feel confident saying that the U.S. does not use scapegoats. We have our own issues as well. Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
sir.
We're one of the freest countries in the world, but don't think for a minute that something shady can't happen here.
Well, one thing everyone always has to understand is that while we have constitutionally protected rights and such things as that, there are people. The whole entire government, the whole entire nation is made up of people, and people are bound to err. That is just a part of our society. And so, yes, you are absolutely correct in that. While it's a great country, and I think it's got boundless potential, and it's already great as it is, there are always things going on that could be better or could be fixed, or some bad eggs in the equation. But with that, we got the third part from the whole family, so let's read it.
And the third part says, thunderstorm ever, referencing the Family Guy Peter's prostate exam court case.
What?
Also, I've been on the BBBWL mode, busy, broke, but watching later. LSA.
Well, I thank you so much for the support of the whole family. And no, he wasn't arrested like that. We actually saw it on film. It was a clear, just a spring day, and he got arrested at his house. But still,
he was on the back patio studying in a book, it looked like.
It looked like he was studying some more classified documents. I'm just kidding. We don't know what they were, but still, it's perfectly fine, the whole family. And I'm just happy to know that you're still around and watching, because we hate when people leave for good. And it's good to know that you're back. And so thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does answer that question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a $6 super chat and says, the guy I mentioned before is living in Ukraine, but thinks NATO is evil. Go figure.
Huh. Well, if he thinks NATO is evil, oh boy. Well, I don't think he's met the Russians yet. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, Activista said, know your rights. Understand your rights well enough to explain them to someone else. Now, that's something I think that a lot of people in this country need to know. And it's not just the rights that you hear in the Constitution. It's real applicable rights. Like when a cop asks, can I search your vehicle? You can say no. And when a cop asks you questions, you can refuse to answer them. Or if you're not being detained, you're free to leave. People ought to just know this stuff. No one really knows that, though. And I feel like that's a huge shortcoming in America, is that nobody ever really explains to you what you really can and can't do. And that's why a lot of people have misunderstandings about how far-reaching the government's power really is. Or, I guess the day-to-day running with a government official, whether it be just a police officer or whatever. How much power do they really have? And what can they really do? Not a lot of people know that. And that's why people go into interrogation rooms and police, and I guess you say police stations, and they're interrogated and they admit to committing a crime they never committed because they were intimidated by the police, and the police told them, we have undeniable evidence you did something, you better say you did it, or else we're going to put you under the prison. And then they admit to doing something they never did. There's a lot of stuff like that happens in this country, and it's sadly because people don't really know what they can and can't do. And I feel like people ought to be educated on that stuff. Honestly feel like if tax dollars should be diverted to anything as a domestic program, one thing I would divert it to on a federal level is a categorical grant to each state, providing them funding for specific classes in every single school on what your rights are and what your rights aren't in practical, real-life situations. I feel like that would be a great thing to educate the public on, or the citizenry on. But with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. That was a really good point. I just had to address that for a second. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $4 super chat from Deeds Miller, who says, I chatted with a female MiG-29 pilot, and I'm pretty sure that the Ghost of Kyiv is real and it's a squadron.
I think I've heard that as well, but you know, the whole thing about the Ghost of Kyiv, it became very touchy because it was made by a War Thunder YouTuber, and he came up with it, and then it just stuck and spread like wildfire. So then everyone got really scared of saying the Ghost of Kyiv. But still, interesting point. I will try and look into that. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Deeds Miller once again, who puts in a $3 super chat and says, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. One of the biggest mess ups in trial history.
Oh man, I have to say that was. And you know, and OJ Simpson has been going around for the rest of his life pretty much taunting everyone that he kind of did do it. And they can't try him on it again. But still, with that, that does address that fairly well. And remember when the Seinfeld episode came out, Matthew, about the bra, you know, like the woman walking down the street only wearing a bra, and then they brought her into court, you know, because they crashed the car, and they were like, if the bra does not fit, they must acquit, and it didn't fit, so, you know, it was a whole OJ joke. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again for the support.
All right, and let's see here. Lewis said, you think a cop is going to say, okay, I won't search you. If they want to search you, they will. They actually can't. Unless they bring like a K9 or something and say it detected something or smelled something in the car, they can't just simply, you know, you can't just like say, no, you can't search my vehicle. And they say, no, we're going to search it anyway, and just bust into the vehicle. They have to have more than that.
And if they do, if they do go, okay, and then if they find anything in there, if you have a competent attorney, the attorney will have the entire case thrown out because it was an unlawful search.
Yeah, or at least that's the way it's supposed to work in theory, most of the time at least.
Yeah, and then, you know, a judge could sit there and go, oh, I don't think so, and then you'd have to go to the Court of Appeals and all that stuff. But, you know, anyways, that's getting down a whole rabbit hole. I hope we addressed that fairly well, though, and we are on to the next one. Also, good morning, Stefan. You're coming in really late, like in the last 5 minutes of the stream, sadly, but hey.
Oh, yes. And up next, we have a $2 super chat from James Dunn, who says, can you check out the USMC lighting carriers?
The LHDs, yeah, we can. We've looked at them before. LHD aircraft carriers. If you're talking about these are actually run by the Department of the Navy, but usually just have a massive amount of Marines on them. They are kind of like smaller carriers. I guess you could say these are more so equivalent to most countries' aircraft carriers that aren't American. These are what we call LHDs. These are not what we call aircraft carriers, but still, they are very neat, and they're usually used to support amphibious assaults. That's what they're made for. But a really cool thing. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope you enjoyed that fairly well.
All right, and the next one goes to Sharon Flynn, who puts in a $2 super chat and says, sorry, it just says $1.99, but here you go.
And I thank you for the support. Any support helps us, and I got to thank you so much for just finding it worthwhile of supporting us. It means a lot to us that folks do find us worthwhile to support because, you know, like when you really think about it, it's just crazy to think. Like, we've never run an ad or anything, and y'all find this channel every single day, and y'all found it so far to be worthwhile to actually spend the time and the effort to support us. And I got to thank each and every one of y'all for that. No matter whether the support be big nor small, it's still greatly appreciated from everyone. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Sharon Rubenstein and also Michael Elliott. They each put in a $2 super chat and without a comment. But thank you, Sharon and Michael, very much for the support. And the last one we have is from Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a $1 donation and says, I enjoy the stream. It's because you are decents.
And thank you so much for enjoying the stream. We try to be decent. We really do. And I hope that we meet that mark most of the time. Of course, we err like everyone. And no one's perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect person on this earth. But you know, I thank you so much for enjoying everything we do. We try our best. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again. And we are on into our live chats. We don't really have a lot of time, so I think we're only going to be able to get to 5, but we're going to try and get to as many as we can before we round out tonight's stream. And so with that, we are on to the first one.
All right, and the first one goes to the Morse code decoders of the stream, which are JP's Gone Fishing, Rumpelstiltskin, Cfay, Mark Hodges, Cliff Simonson, Dark Warrior 137, Paul Schultz, and Earl Bernew. And they said the Morse tonight says Russians get smacked in the face and then they run off the field. It's kind of lame, if you ask me.
And that's the sound of money. And y'all got that correct. That is the Morse code message for the night. And the Russians sit there and go, oh, what an invincible, what a mighty and legendary. And then they get shot in the face. I'm running away. Like, it's kind of sad. But anyways, I hope that addresses the Morse code message. Thank you all for deciphering that for the 414th day in a row. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And the next one goes to Rudy, who says, have you guys heard about the new digital recruitment laws that Russia is implementing?
I think I have. It's about the whole email thing. I think we have heard about that. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And we're moving on to the next one. I'm actually going to be picking out the next one because Lewis said one time they pulled over my friend while I was in the car. The reason someone on your block has a warrant, I kid you not, searched everyone. You guys have experienced bad cops, I guess. And no, we have. You know, someone would be completely amiss to say that everyone's perfect because, you know, look at the guy who's being alleged to have leaked classified documents. You know, there are people in the military who aren't the greatest people. There are people who are police officers who aren't the greatest people. There are bad eggs out there. And the thing is that they shouldn't have been able to do that. But they did nonetheless. And that's something that you should take up with that police department or the city council and see about having addressed. But of course, I see what you're saying. So with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one is from Hoodoo, Texas. And he says they have not charged Teixeira with treason. He is charged with 18 U.S. Code 1924, unauthorized removal and retention of classified documents or material, 5 years max. And I haven't heard that yet. But if that is the case, I would highly doubt it's a single charge. They're probably going to count stack that. So probably every document that he took, they're probably going to make that a count, would be my guess. It seems to be the in trend thing to do these days. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, you know, if he's getting, I can't say that, but that is fairly interesting to hear. If that's what he's been charged with now, that would be very interesting. And so I thank you for sharing that with us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from, let's see, Vinyl Vish Records, who says, is the Moscow, or I think I meant to say the Moskva, the most expensive single piece of military equipment ever destroyed since World War II?
Yes, I believe it is, actually. It was a very expensive cruiser. Let's pull up the price of it. How much did the Slava class cruiser cost? Let's see here. I mean, how expensive is the Moskva? It costs around $750 million, so nearly so $750 million lost in a single missile attack, pretty much. So yes, that would have to be the most expensive single item ever lost in a war since World War II. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have another super chat from the entire family: Billy, Joe, Carl, Bob, Danny, and Frank. And they said, Matthew, please read them again. I don't think the Enforcer got the full context. It needs to be read faster in one go. You send the episode. No?
No,
I haven't.
But sadly, I haven't seen that episode, but I do thank you for the support. And I'm trying to think of that episode. I don't know. I haven't seen it, sadly. But thank you once again for the support. And we are on to the next one. Also, Uncle Chunky's, I'm sorry, we can't make any comments like that. That's getting into a very political vein there. But with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, to the request, please read them again. The whole family, I've actually only got one in the spreadsheet because I read them directly out of the live chat as they came in. I only have the first one, sadly. So I would read them off again. And also, they've disappeared from the top bar as well, so I can't even go back to see them. So sorry about that. As the Canadians would say, sorry.
You know what? You wouldn't believe it. I actually have them over here.
Oh?
Yeah, you know, I just clicked viewer activity on the dashboard, and it actually just showed all of them to me. So he said, about this guy/suspect being guilty or not, are you sure that arrest was all normal-like, and, you know, wasn't all evil and grainy and black and white, and somehow it all took place in a fierce thunderstorm with more lightning strikes going off per second than in any other thunderstorm ever? Reference Family Guy. Oh! Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, it may be like that now. Now I understand what you're talking about. I think I have seen like a clip of that on YouTube, but I've never watched the whole episode. So with that, I thank you for the support once again, the whole family. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Sifei, who says China's carrier Shandong is by Taiwan, and with the U.S. sending a ship or ships, where do you think China will send their second carrier, the Liandong, there also?
Man, I gotta tell you, there's so many jokes that could be made on those names of those aircraft carriers that we will refrain from making for, reasons. But they will not be joined by the Liandong anytime soon, because that one is actually in for refit right now. And from what we understand, it'll be outfitted for the next few months. So that one will not be available. It will just be the Shandong. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. We are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and this one goes to, let's see, Paula McDonald, who says, why hasn't Ukraine taken over Transnistria?
Because that is technically sovereign Moldovan territory, which means they would be going to war with the Moldovans. And I know it is the semi-autonomous country of Transnistria. However, it is still officially recognized as a Moldovan territory. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Kilo Charlie, KC, who says, if cooling stops at the ZNPP, is a meltdown imminent?
Yes. Power plants always require cooling for an incredibly long time after they're actually technically shut down. So if cooling stopped, that thing would blow up. It would go nuclear, it would have a meltdown, and it would be a terrible situation because probably all 4 reactors at that point would melt down and well, they would just melt down. I mean, I was about to say melt down and melt down. That is melting down, but still, with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And it's that time of the night, y'all. It's time to round out the stream. It's been a great one. It's been a whole 3 hours, 35 minutes, and 7 seconds as of me reading that off. And I got to thank you all so much once again for coming tonight for the news. Of course, if y'all enjoyed the news and the question segment and you made it through both parts, you have a lot of endurance because that is a long stream. And if y'all enjoyed, make sure to subscribe as we run the stream every single day of the week, 6 days a week, at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays, covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and even international news sometimes when the situation arises. For example, last night, we covered Taiwan and North Korea. Unfortunately, tonight, we didn't have any international news, but we will be covering it if we ever find it pressing enough. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. I hope you all have a great night. Good luck, stay safe, take care, and of course, Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you all tomorrow.
And good night, Slav Ukraine, and innocent until proven guilty. Although the Russians are pretty guilty.
They're very guilty, блядь.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Слава, ні воля, ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці. Запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу.